All right, we are calling to order the Housing and Human Welfare Special Meeting. It is Thursday, September the 29th. The time is 6:02 p.m. We'll start with a roll call. Myself, Alderman Gay, Alderman Tierney.
Here.
Alderman Schandelmeyer is about 5 minutes out, coming from D.C. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes of 9/20/2022.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Well, we don't have to. Yeah. Next item on the agenda is appointments. We'll start with AP 6722, appointment of Linda Money to the Human Relations Commission. I just seen Linda.
Is Linda here?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to come forward?
Oh, okay. Do you want to say a few words?
And you could just state your name, address. Yeah. No. You could hit the, yeah, there you go. Yep. Just state your name, address, and then just share your interest in the Human Relations Commission. Obviously, I know you very well, and I think you'd be an amazing representative on the commission, but just for the general public.
My name is Linda Moody, and I live at 55 Primrose Hill Lane in Annapolis. I have been here for 3 years now, and I've been working in Annapolis since about 1999. But I've been working in nonprofit for a while. I started out working with Boys and Girls Clubs and have worked with several other youth development nonprofits since then, mentoring nonprofits. And it's given me a really good opportunity to understand how Annapolis is and what what the human relations in Annapolis look like, what's kind of broken, what's working. And I am very interested mainly, and Dwan, you would know this because we've known each other for a while, but I'm interested in just understanding kind of how the city works. Honestly, I've always kind of been on the outside, being more of an activist, a community organizer. But I'm also getting to a point where I understand that I need to really explore how does all this work? How does this process work? How does the systems work in order to really show up properly? Because what I do care about is equity and inclusion in Annapolis in all layers of our community, of our housing, of our systems, and I think this is kind of a next step for me. So selfishly, it is something that I would like to just get some experience. And what I feel like I could bring to the committee is that I do have now several decades, which is interesting to say, of experience working in lots of different communities in Annapolis, a good understanding of where there are some layers that probably need better services, better relationships, and I feel dedicated to do that.
Ellie, do you have any questions or
I
comments?
just want to reiterate what you said in your resume. That was very important when you said it is the most important work that the city should do, equity and inclusion. So thank you for that perception. And I make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation.
I'm gonna second that and also just say I think I didn't realize the professional certificate at Georgetown, specifically in leadership on diversity, equity, and inclusion, is just so critical, and I'm excited to see what you can bring. And so I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Awesome. So it'll be moved to October the 10th.
Right.
At the full committee. You can be present if you wish to, but you don't have to. And so congratulations, and we look forward to having you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next item on the agenda is AP 6822, appointment of Catherine Moody to the Human Relations Commission. Is Ms. Moody here? I don't think so. Okay. Do you feel comfortable after viewing the resume and the application sent in?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, it's great the fact that she she was a police officer for 8 years before moving to Annapolis, and she transitioned from law enforcement to enforcing ethical regulations.
Absolutely.
Of police officer conduct. So I think that's a real critical issue now, and I would make a motion for a favorable recommendation.
Absolutely.
I'm sure she had a reason why she couldn't be here.
And I believe it's if I'm not mistaken, HBCU attendee, so that's even better. I'll second the motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Awesome. Next item on the agenda is AP 6922, appointment of Rachel Carr to the Education Commission. Is Ms. Carr here? Awesome. You can state your name, address, and then just share your interest in the Education Commission.
All right, well, good evening. So my name is Rachel Carr. I live at 32 Murray Avenue, and I'm very glad to be possibly taking on a position on the Education Commission. So I've been in Annapolis for a year now, although I'm a Maryland native, so it's great to be back here. And I'm looking for ways to become more connected to the community. So I'm a professor at the Naval Academy, and so in the course of my work, I do a great deal of thinking about challenges that students and teachers face, and I would value the opportunity to work with others in the community who work on those challenges. I think I'd bring a different perspective to the commission because my experience is mostly in higher education, although I've also been a volunteer tutor with public school students and with GED programs. So I would be glad to try to strengthen connections between the Naval Academy and, of course, that's a big institution of education in the city, but also to learn about the other educational institutions here.
I was wondering how you had time. No, I mean, it's great. Your resume is amazing, and I think it's really cool that you teach at the Naval Academy and have that perspective, and you happen to be a constituent of mine. And you do have the experience from Capitol Hill. Oh my God, if you could survive Capitol Hill, you can survive, well, maybe not. No. But I motion for a favorable recommendation.
A second, and I second everything the Alderwoman has said. Physics, that's amazing. And I really think that, as you mentioned, just having a connection to higher education is so important because we currently don't have any outside of recreational academic relationships with the Naval Academy. I remember a program they did when I was at the Boys and Girls Club. It was like mid shit. We used to do something with Dr. Corky, and he would come and we would build like Lego robotics and all of this stuff. It was awesome. And so to have that connection would be great. And so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Congratulations. And as I mentioned previously, it'll be passed on to the full committee or full council for October the 10th.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next item on the agenda are presentations. We'll start with ID 20322, presentations of the Annapolis property owners. Has anyone received an invitation specific to our meeting on last Tuesday? Any property managers or representation? Awesome. You could come up to the table here in the front. Right here, you got the mics and the chairs. Thank you so much for joining us. If you could just state your name and the property that you are representing, that would be appreciated. And the mics are, right there. You could just hit the green button in the middle and that'll let you know the sound's on.
I'm Marsha Blunt from Penrose Management Company, and we have Overy Courts 1, 2, and 3.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I am Sherry Hall. I manage Robin Wood and Bloomsbury, and I represent the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis.
Awesome. Thank you very much as well. And
What properties? I'm sorry, what properties?
Overy Court 1, 2, and 3, and Wilbourn Estates.
Okay.
so before we get started, before we get started, so we extended invitations as well to Fairstead, which represents
Admiral Oaks.
Woodside Gardens. They communicated today via email, and I still have not heard a single thing from Admiral Oaks. And so we will be, if approved, obviously we'll go into discussion just quickly before we get started with you all. By the authority given to us under the city code, the city council through the city clerk and any of his standing or special committees through its chairman may summon and require the testimony of any witness and require the production from any witness summoned on any paper or other things which may be valued of interest in any hearing which is ordered by the city council or any of its committee. The city council may also summon witnesses and require the production of any paper or other things before the civil service board. I think we have tried to communicate repeatedly with both property management and development teams from Fairstead as well as Admiral Oaks. I'll make a motion to have my request as the chair of the committee to move forward with a request of summons to the committee, and that'll be at our third meeting that'll be at our next meeting of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee, the third Monday of the month at 6:00 p.m. So can I have
I move that you have that authority.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And so we'll move forward with the summons. I've also made it very clear to the Office of Law that I would like to use any authority that the City Council has under Section 18 of the City Code, or Section 8 under Section 1740 of the City Code, to move forward with fines and removal of residential licenses for properties, for those two properties, Admiral Oaks and Woodside Gardens. I really appreciate you all being before us today, because I think it sets a good tone for the residents to let them know that you really, really care about the communities that you represent. The fact that you showed up, took time out of the day, is a significant first step. And I wish I could say the same for the other properties, but I really can, and it's disappointing. The reason that we requested your attendance here today, we had public hearing on the 20th, and we had about 20 residents give testimony related to a number of communities across the city of Annapolis. But we thought it would be important to follow up with property management and see what, if any, progress is being done. Because I'm sure you've had conversations with the constituency as well. And then just get a better understanding of how we can assist you moving forward as well. So let's start.
Marcia.
Ms. if it's
Marcia.
Okay, yeah,
Yep.
Marcia, let's start with you. And you just give us a quick background on the property. And if you want, we can go into some of the detail of some of the things that have been stated. And I will share with you the contact information and complaints and I'll do the same with you, with the expectation that we can communicate over the next couple of weeks to try to get some solutions. So awesome.
So I saw the video. I was on that email chain. And so the Wilbourn Estates issue, it was an issue that has been resolved, and the drywall has been removed in the affected areas, and it has been cleared. So there is no microbial growth in that unit anymore at Wilbourn Estates. For Overy Court, I don't have the information about when it was built. I've been involved with it for about almost 4 years now. It's a very hard and difficult population that we are serving there. Only because we have outside influencers coming in and causing havoc with our residents in the surrounding neighborhood. So we now have an armed security guard on the property. I understand that Ms. White from Overy Court was here. And so she referenced some things from 2016, which I wasn't involved in then. We have had different property managers there. That is absolutely correct. Only because if someone is not doing their jobs, we have to replace them. And that's just the honest truth there. She doesn't have anything in her unit. There is moss outside of her unit, which is the green growth that she's speaking of. And there's different things that are contributing to that. Some of our residents, actually a lot of our residents across different states, will have air conditioning in our properties. They'll have their windows open and they'll have other things going on. And sometimes that does cause moss to grow. It does cause condensation issues, and it will cause microbial activity. And if they don't tell us right away, we can't address it. So we do complete quarterly unit inspections at all of our properties at Penrose.
You said portable?
Quarterly. Quarterly unit inspections. And so that's when we find a lot of our things happening in the units, because sometimes residents just don't report them. And I'm not saying that we may not have been lacking in some areas. We have been. And so that's why, new property managers have come on board. But I don't know of anything open as far as work orders for that young lady, for Ms. White. And if she has anything, she can definitely contact me. And if you have her contact information, I'll take it and I'll give her a call.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely pass that all along. I have two quick questions, and then I'll pass it off to my colleagues as well. My first question, as it relates to the property management, and understand I'm in no position to. I don't want anybody to lose their job. But I think one of the things, and I mentioned in the email, priority for communication. I don't represent Ward 2, but my colleague has suggested to me that she has had a very difficult time communicating effectively with the property management. And as it relates to issues with trash pickup, as it relates to issues with complaints from constituents. And so if we could have an opportunity maybe to have that addressed, or if you would reach out to my colleague from Ward 2, Alderwoman O'Neill, I'm sorry, and maybe put together a meeting with the property management, her and whoever you would feel necessary to be in attendance, just so that if there are issues in the future, we could address it before we get to public hearing. Absolutely.
Do you have her contact information?
I do, yeah. I can pass that to you as well, definitely. Ellie, do you have any questions?
Sure, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for looking at the video. Let me be honest, it was really disappointing to hear that there was a problem at the Wilbourn Estates. It's new, it's newly built, and it's really supposed to be our prototype, I guess, of the future. And to hear that there was already some damage was really disappointing. Was that a construction issue, or was it damage?
I don't have all of the particulars. I can get that for you, but it was a one-off with something on the roof. But I want to say, so my husband and I had a house built in Delaware almost 4 years ago. There was a problem with the window in our basement. Stuff does happen during construction because they have a lot of subcontractors that come in, and as we do. So things do happen. You just have to get them addressed right away, which we did with this one, because nothing's perfect.
Right.
So we do try to make sure that we stay on top of things. Things do happen. They slip through the cracks, unfortunately. But as soon as we are made aware of them, we do address them.
Yeah. A repetitive concern, a repetitive issue was the fact that calls were made, and this is all properties that we heard from, and I'll ask this question to you as well, is how, when a tenant moves in, number one, is there some kind of list of building rules and regulations, some sort of level of care that you expect from them, and then do you have the contact information? Are you on site? There's definitely a disconnect between the tenant and maintenance. We heard that repetitively, that I called maintenance, they didn't call back. And how is that set up on all your properties?
So for all of the Penrose properties, when you first move in, we go through the lease with the team members, and I'm talking about the property managers or assistant managers. They go through the lease with the prospective move-in.
Right.
Then they do the unit inspection. But during the lease review, there's a house rules that is reviewed as well with the new resident. And in it, they have some information about who they would call. So it's very easy with us. you call the management office, and then there's a recording, and then it prompts you to press whatever buttons to get to our 24 hours maintenance. So if it's after 5 o'clock, they'll have the option if it's an emergency, and we do say if it's a life safety issue, which is fire, flood, electrical outage, or if you have one toilet, one bathroom, and your toilet's not working, then we will be out there immediately. If you're locked out, we will not come out after 8 o'clock at night. That's for team safety in certain areas, and Aubrey Court is one of them.
Do you outsource engineering, maintenance, repair, or do you have your own staff?
We have our own staff, but some things we do have to outsource to
Sure.
third-party folks.
Okay. And do you keep supplies on site, like smoke detectors and things that would?
Absolutely, but in property management, so I've been doing this for 25 years, we go into somebody's unit, I have gone into people's units as well, where if they're cooking and the smoke sets off the smoke detector, they take the battery out, and they leave it out. And so then they're putting themselves and their family members at danger, and they don't tell us about it until we go in there and we find it. And I can't even count how many times I go into somebody's unit with the team members, and the top part of the smoke detector and the battery is in a drawer. So it does happen. I mean, it's not all the time, it's not all residents, but it does happen.
Are we using, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Are we, what's the
should
city
be.
code on that? Yeah, is that?
It should be wired.
Yeah, okay.
It is, it's hardwired and it has the battery backup, but you still have to keep that battery in there.
Right.
If the power goes out, then you're completely uncovered.
Yeah, well, that's good. It sounds, I asked our chief code inspector, I hope I have John's title right, John Manassa. We have a very thorough, it's Title 17, building maintenance, and are the landlords given that, because that's really what we inspect for, and it's important that we, marry up with the same expectations. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It was good to hear that you have that response to them. And if you need our fire department to come and give any sort of lecture on hazards, especially now that with Christmas, the holidays coming and lighting, and they love to do that. Bud Zapata will come out and give a lecture on fire safety.
Absolutely. Did you have any questions on it? No. Awesome. And could we also, once we start to communicate emails, I'd also like to follow up on the trash pickup issue.
Oh, yeah, so we fired the current trash company because of the issues with them picking up our trash.
Perfect. Okay.
And the new company starts tomorrow. They came out on Monday. We did have an issue with that, and we also have issues with illegal dumping because of the cul-de-sacs in our property, and right there where the park is. So we're fighting a battle all the time, and our trash company that we previously had for a couple of years just weren't meeting our needs.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, because I knew that was a concern for health and safety. So.
Yeah, quick question. Was that the illegal dumping, was that the trash company or was that residents?
And it wasn't even residents, it was just people in the neighborhood coming, and they know they can dump and not get caught, and that's what they're doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions so far?
No, I think that's you addressed Karma's. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. If you would like to share as well and state your name again for my colleague and the community that you represent.
Yes, my name is Sherry, Cheri Hall. I'm with the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis. The two properties that I manage are Robinwood and Bloomsbury Court. Trying to recall the questions.
So I guess we'll start with.
I wanted to know how your maintenance was set up. What is the procedure that the tenant has to get their problems answered? Who's on site? Do you have your own staff?
Right.
Was I on? Maintenance procedures and the level, your level of what you expect from your tenants, that you can help them with,
Right.
Yeah, and whether you have a storage of things that they may need.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, much like Marcia, we, during the lease signing, we lay out the tenant responsibility. We also lay out our responsibility
Right.
to them,
Okay.
which is really important to stress that we want to provide a safe and healthy environment, a safe and healthy apartment for the resident. We do have a storage, a maintenance shop where we store things like batteries and smoke alarms, smaller items, but not far away from our property is the headquarters for the Housing Authority, which has a huge warehouse where we store appliances and larger items, and they're readily available as we need them. As far as residents being able to submit a work order or service request during the office hours, they can call us, we enter it in, or after hours, they can call, and there's a service that's available all the time for them to give what their issue is. That service does have a list of what is considered an emergency. For instance, like Marcia has said, you have one toilet and the toilet's plugged, yes, that's an emergency, Your refrigerator not working at 3 o'clock in the morning will not constitute an emergency, but we certainly log that and we go and take care of it when we get in the morning. So they can call any hours, and I, as the property manager, also, when something is called in, whatever time, day or night, my cell phone that the Housing Authority has given me, I get an email. And so one time I get that email, we have so much time to respond to that and take care of it. If it's not taken care of within that time frame, I get a call. And then I will call the on-call maintenance person and find out where we are in this process, what is maybe a hindrance to having that person take care of this issue. And if I have to go out and help take care of it, I will. And then we do follow up when maintenance requests have been completed by our team, which is resident there. They work there on site. We'll call residents, make sure things were done to their expectation, and see if there's anything else that we need to do.
Do you have, and I might have the wrong, no, it was a prevalent issue on several properties, is infestation, mice. So how do you handle that? Do you have, there are two different things. Do you have an extermination process?
We have an extermination service that comes every week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we do different sections of the property when they come. We don't do the whole property every week. However, if a resident were to call in and say, I saw a mouse behind my washer, we'll add that particular apartment to the rotation for that week. That doesn't keep them from getting their normal rotation, but it'd just be an extra added service for them if they saw something. Yes, and terminates comes every week.
Are you aware of any mice issues or,
Yes, I am, and we're dealing with them now. We have setting up a meeting with Terminix to see how better they can address it then, because what they're doing now isn't working like we would like for it to work. So we want to explore other options with how they can do something a little bit more robust to alleviate this problem and not just put a quick fix on it.
Okay. And are you aware of any exposed lead or exposed asbestos conditions?
No,
No, none.
No, I know we're an older property, but I think all that was mitigated. I've only been with the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis for about 5 weeks.
Oh, well,
Yeah, I've been in property management a long time.
Right, yeah,
But this
yeah.
is a new, a new property
right.
community for
Yeah,
me.
okay.
And so I'm still learning
Good.
the property itself,
It's
but
good to
I
have
am not.
Great to have a fresh perspective.
Well, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the nice things about the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis is those of us who are coming in new do have a different perspective.
Right.
And we are listened to. It's not, well, this is the way we do it and this is the way it's going to be done. We have really good dialogue and share information we're pretty available to one another to share what works and what doesn't work and why my idea won't work, which I understand that some of my ideas won't work. It's a different kind of way of doing things, and I like the communication that we have. We're learning a lot of things. I'm not aware of asbestos or lead. I think those items were mitigated long before I got here.
One last question, which has been sort of, has had unintended consequences, is a lot of these tenants work during the day. You know, they're gone, and they aren't there for necessary repairs, or they'll miss an inspection or something like that, which just keeps the problem longer. Do you have any sort of procedure where you can get permission from the tenant to open the door for someone?
Well, absolutely, we have to have permission to enter if a resident's not going to be there. We just can't walk into someone's apartment.
Right.
So when someone calls in,
Yeah.
I ask if they're going to be home. If they say they're not, I ask specifically, do we have permission to enter? We may have to get a third party to come in and take care of this.
Yeah.
One of our maintenance staff or myself or the assistant will accompany them.
Yeah.
Do we have permission to go in and do that?
Okay.
Absolutely, we do.
So it's important for the tenant to tell you that they have something coming up or vice
It's true,
versa.
and you know, even if they say that they're going to be home, I say, well, let's just say someone has invited you to lunch and last minute you're going to go out. I still want to get that
Yeah.
permission to enter.
Yeah.
I don't want to depend on the fact that they're just sitting there
Right.
waiting, because they may have something that comes up and they have to go.
Right.
So I always get permission to enter. If they're there, that's super, because they can go with us and see what we're doing to mitigate the issue that they have contacted us about. And then if they aren't there, we give them a call and let them know what we've done and make sure things are to their satisfaction.
Thank you very much for being aware of how that can be a real bottleneck into getting something done that, you know, the longer it waits, the worse it is. So thank you very much for your answers.
Alderman Schindelmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a question on the pest control problems and then a couple other ones. When it comes to the pest control issues, what's the usual response here? Like someone calls in and says, I have mice. Do you just throw a couple traps down and then call that a day? Do you actually look at like where is the rodent getting in and do actual repair services like some of the other things? What's the usual process?
In the immediate, we do like to give them traps. We also like to come and see where they think the mice are coming in from. We can do certainly a temporary fix, putting in some, that's filler spray or steel wool, all those good things, and patch up the hole temporarily. But then we always add them to the rotation of our list for pest control. We make sure that if their particular section of the property is not on that list, we add them anyway. And then the pest control people come in, they get the list from us, and we have written in there other apartments that maybe have called us with an issue for rodents, and we make sure that that's taken care of as well.
Is there on the grounds addressing of potential like causes or things that may draw them in? Like, okay, here's untouched garbage, we're getting rid of it, or here's a likely nest we're going to try. I understand rodents have been around forever for a reason. They're darn good at surviving, but just interested in seeing what some of the...
Well, I will say that from my experience in the last 5 weeks, a lot of our property is surrounded by woods. And so those are the areas where we like to have them put out the bait traps and that sort of thing. And we make sure that, or at least I try to make sure that those are being replenished when they come out, even if it's not in the section that they're doing. Let's check those, please, and make sure they're being properly serviced and rebaited or whatever has to happen in order for them to be effective. But the woods, we really have a lot of woods around the perimeter of our property, and those buildings are the ones that seem more likely to have an issue with mice.
Makes sense. How many maintenance people do you have on staff?
How many?
Maintenance personnel do you have on staff?
Well, the ones that service my property every day, I have 4. A supervisor and then a grounds person and 2 other maintenance folks. However, if we need someone to come from another property, we give a shout out and they'll come over and help us as well as we do if they have an issue that we can help out with. So I don't know how many maintenance people are with the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis total, but we all really are good at working as a team. If someone has a specific need that needs to be dealt with, we can pull people from other properties to go to another property to help with that mitigation. Yes, we can.
What's usually the average wait time then on a response request? I understand there's the prioritizing. Let's say I have something that's not
Sure.
an emergency issue, but
Well, an emergency issue, we have to respond within a couple hours.
Yeah.
We you know, if it's a true emergency, we just all hands on deck if need be to try and get that taken care of.
plumbing and fire stuff, yeah. But let's say broken light.
A
What's the
broken
average-
light,
Yeah, what's average response time on that?
48 hours.
Okay. And then, are there any recurring maintenance issues that keep popping up that might require like a more systemic fix? I understand you're new to the position and maybe haven't seen patterns yet, but
Well, mostly it's broken blinds.
all right.
You know, we try to keep those in stock and we don't want it to look as if we're not taking care of a property. So that's ongoing. The mice is ongoing. Nothing real significant. It's not as if we have all the time people's toilets are blocking up or that sort of thing. We do our preventive maintenance and we do our spot checks and our inspections and different things. And again, I'll have to quote Marcia, people will not call in a work order. And then we find it after the fact or after they've called the city to say we haven't taken care of it. And because we do take really good records, we go back and don't see that anyone has ever called that in. We're just as perplexed as everyone else. Like, how did this slip through the cracks? But if it's not called in and we don't know about it, we're at the mercy of somebody letting us know. And we don't inspect every apartment every day. But we do, all of us, make it a habit of seeing people, residents on the street. Hey, how you doing? How are things in your apartment? Just in general, you know, how are things going in your apartment? Anything we need to come in taken care of that you haven't let us know? Just in general, those kinds of conversations. And I have found in the last few weeks I've been here, that's really helpful.
Thank you.
Do you have, last question I have, you brought that up, I know in Bloomsbury Square, there's, one tenant that it is quite blind, can't see very well, and do you have a list of tenants that would need assistance if there's a power outage or something and they're, need their oxygen
I'm
machine?
familiar with that particular resident at Bloomsbury. Yes, I am. I don't know if I have a list of especially needing residents who might need something in the event of a
power outage.
anything kind of catastrophic or power outage.
Yeah.
I can check into that for you.
And we'll help you with that. If you give us that list, we'll have Office of Emergency Management have that list as well to make sure those people are taken care of if there's a power outage.
Well, that's very kind of you to offer that, and I'll look into that. And how should I get that list to you?
I can give you my card.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All of our info is on the city website too.
Okay, and I just want to make sure I send it to the right person.
Oh yeah, of course, no problem. So that'll be, that's a great follow up. I think that's actually a very, very good idea for everybody, Ellie, is to have some sort of list like that. If you could also provide for me at a later time, just it doesn't have to be tonight, the name of the company that we're outsourcing to for pest control.
Terminix.
Perminex?
Terminix.
Oh, okay.
Terminix. Sorry.
Terminex. Awesome. Thank you so much. Just so we can, and then also my colleagues' recommendations. Mice infestation is not fun. And we've had somebody come up here, not at your property, but in Haka, with a kid who's had a dead mice in their playpen. That's unacceptable. And so I hope that we, and you could follow up expeditiously on those concerns as it's related to pest issues. And I'll make myself available to you as well. I'm pleased that you're here, and I hope to work closely with you. I represent Robinwood, so we'll get to know each other very
That's
well.
great to know. Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you. I'm still learning who is who in the city of Annapolis, having only been here a short while, but I'm open to be available however I need to be, not only at my properties, but at any other time too.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
That's-
I represent Bloomsbury. But we
Oh,
all-
perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna write that on
So
here.
you got everybody you need here. And just while we're closing out with this group on presentations, Oberry Court 1 or Oberry 1 and 3 the RAD scheduling closed this past August. Is that correct?
It just closed in September.
September? Okay, awesome. And then also the weatherization grant for Robinwood.
Robinwood,
was, yeah, supposed to be out in August. The RFP, is that out as well?
Yes, I've already been informed of the particular apartments that are going to be involved in that weatherization. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great news. Well, this was very helpful. I'm not kidding. It's important that you all showed up tonight just so that we can have an understanding of what's going on the properties on a more intimate level. And like I said, we'll definitely be following up just so that at least in particular we can start with this 20 group of people across all the properties and make sure that their issues are taken care of. So I really appreciate it. Again, for the record, let the record state the only two that showed up were representatives from Oberry, Bloomsbury, and Robinwood. I want the record to state that clearly. And I also want the record to state clearly that Fairstead representing Woodside Gardens and Enterprise representing Admiral Oaks refused communication until the last minute. I haven't heard a single thing from Admiral Oaks or their property managers as it relates to any of the issues that are taking place on their properties. And just to be clear as well, the violations of the Annapolis City Code were Title 17, Building and Constructions, Chapter 1740, Residential Property Maintenance Code, Article 2, Basic Services and Sanitary Facilities, Article 5, Maintenance, Article 7, Owner, Operator, and Occupant Responsibilities. And the subpoena and the enforcement that we'll follow through on was granted to us under Article 8, Enforcement of Chapter 1740. So I thank you all so very much.
I just wanted to let you know too, we had a meeting last night at Wilbourn Estates with the chief of police. Melissa Maddox Evans was there last night, and Fairstead was there actually last night as well. And there were a number of Woodside Gardens residents, and I think there was another property that's in front of Woodside Gardens, and I can't remember the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were there as well. So we were there last night until about 8 o'clock or a little after. So we are trying to address everything
Absolutely.
in the neighborhoods as much as we can.
Perfect.
And in light of that, I'd just like to make one more mention. I was able to secure a meeting with one of the sergeants on the route where Robinwood is. And we did have a meeting. Again, Melissa was there, and Sergeant McGriff. And we did have a meeting. Now we're starting to get police reports and things that weren't necessarily weren't easily forthcoming. And so we're starting to get those police reports so that we can see what's happening. Residents won't report it, but if the police are called, we're starting to get that information and a little bit more available to us. So, you know, we're again, like, we're just trying to make some inroads to have people know that we are trying to do things to keep them safe.
Did the police happen to mention how many times or how do they loop around Oberry Court? Do they make a loop?
No, but I've been to Oberry Court numerous times, and I've told the chief this as well, is that the police officers will sit about 2 or 3 blocks down from the property, and nobody's walking the property except for one officer that the property manager says that she's really familiar with, which is Officer Smichaels. She will walk the property.
Yeah.
But she seems to be the only one that will get out and walk the property for whatever reasons.
They have, some of them have to stay near the radio because they have to.
No, I understand. It's just that our residents think that we're police officers. We are not. And I tell my team here and anywhere else, your life is more important than anything else. And so I don't want them putting themselves in danger, but they can enforce the lease. They just can't get out there and argue with people that aren't, you just can't do it. It's not safe.
Any other questions from Awesome. Thank you both so very much, and have a
Thank
great night.
you.
Do
Thank
you
you and welcome.
need us to stick around?
No, you're free to go.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank
Of course.
Yeah.
I am
Thanks for your time.
right on schedule too. I said 45 minutes per thing, and I'm
Don't
all right.
jinx it.
Teresa, we got a bet going on now. Next item on the agenda is ID 19322 presentations on workforce housing in the Planning Commission, as well as our any representative from the planning staff that see it fit to come forward.
While they're transferring up, I do want to apologize for my lateness, DC traffic coming in.
Of course, and I'll let them know that too as well. Yeah,
Much appreciated.
I don't think so.
Teresa Teresa should be on the west.
Well, because I'm sure the bus also goes 2 miles an hour.
I don't know about
All right. Okay, so thank you all so much for giving us this time to really just catch up on all the things that you're doing in planning and zoning, and as well as on the Planning Commission. We've got a quick list to run through. I've shared it with the Director of Planning and Zoning, and just catching up on some issues. The issue that I wanted to focus on primarily with and give the chair of the Planning Commission an opportunity to speak on that. What really spurred this was obviously everybody seeing the editorial as it relates to the Willows project, and I just thought, okay, we got to sit down and figure out what the issue is as it relates to affordable housing and the communications that are taking place on the Planning Commission. I had a chance to talk with the chair. And I felt very, very good actually about the conversation that we had. I've also had a chance to sit in on the work session of the Planning Commission. But there are still some issues with the Willows, and I hope that we could not get clarity, because I don't want to, hold you to anything outside of your official meeting, but just catch myself and my colleagues up to speed there. And then also, I have some other properties that you could chime in as well on.
Alex Pine, I'm the current chair of the Planning Commission, and I'm going to represent the commission tonight here. So as you know, we shouldn't talk in specifics about any particular project, especially when it's something that's before us, but we can certainly talk about these things in generalities. I think it's important to mention just a little bit about the conversation that we had after that piece appeared in the paper. And one of the things that was not well described in that article in the paper was that the meeting that was held, that the piece in the paper was referring to, was a work session. And just for anybody who's not familiar with work sessions, we've talked about this at the beginning of the last few work sessions we've had, is these are off-the-record meetings with developers before we get an actual application to review. And they're off the record and an opportunity for us to have a frank conversation with a developer outside of the constraints of what's in the code. So often these things, because they're off the record and they're a frank exchange of ideas, they often can sound very negative. And I think that's what the person that wrote the article in the paper was reacting to. But in general, they don't reflect how we might review an application. They're just an exchange of ideas. And typically when we get a work session, it's very early on in a project before much effort has been expended on doing engineering drawings, studies, etc. And that's when it's easy to give this kind of frank feedback, and changes can be made more easily before a lot of effort has been expended on something that's then harder to change based on that feedback. So I thought it was just important to describe that process of a work session. And we, just for the record, we encourage anybody who's going to come and bring an application to the city to come have a work session. We like having that exchange of ideas because it benefits everybody. It makes it easier for us to review, makes it easier for the applicants eventually to submit something that's not going to run into an unforeseen issue, because the issues typically are laid out on the table in these early work sessions. Now, more specifically with respect to, any affordable housing or workforce housing projects, in general, we look at all projects the same in light of, we review things based on what's in the code. And, ultimately our big picture goal is to have the best project that can be produced under the constraints. And given, Annapolis, a lot of what happens here is infill development. And all projects have certain constraints based on the fact that infill development. But we always try to make sure that it's the best project that can happen under those constraints and within our purview of the law. One of the things that we're really always concerned with is how are projects gonna fare over 20, 30, 40 years? Because that very much, we're concerned with what's in the comprehensive plan. And, we want to look and see how a project's going to last over time. And so part of that is making sure that the design, it's a quality design. And by design, I don't just mean architecture, but the site layout, the circulation, how it interacts with the public realm, those kinds of things are really important, because we don't want to have a project that 10 or 15 years down the road, after one life cycle, or 20 or 30 years, maybe after one life cycle, that project, is a detriment to the city or produces other problems. And I can give a couple of examples that I've run into, and I know one of them is on your list, which is Rocky Gorge, where, choices were made in the 80s about development patterns that are causing us big problems now. So in the example of Rocky Gorge, for that project, there's really no good answer, because you put some development, regardless of what it is, you're going to have vehicular traffic through Oxford Landing, and there's one road in and out, or you're going to go onto Aristide Allen, and the commission has, and this was before I was a member, the commission has weighed in on that, by the way. You can go back and review that. But it produces a project that has really no great outcome. And I personally believe it's a lot of the problem there is because of the development pattern that was laid out in Oxford Landing. It's the typical sort of suburban curvilinear development pattern. And had that been laid out as a grid of streets, for example, the issue of vehicular traffic would have been significantly mitigated. But that's a choice that was made 40 years ago. Another example is the Primrose School development on Hilltop. A lot of the problem with that is vehicular access onto Hilltop and Spa, because nothing else connects around there. Gentry Court, Farragut, all of those places are essentially development islands, and those decisions were made in the 80s and 90s, and those decisions are causing us problems now. So I give those two as examples. So when we look at projects, we try to look down the road. Okay, what's going to happen to the city? How are we going to develop over the next 20 or 30 years based on what's in the comprehensive plan and the best understanding that we have, and try to make decisions and especially in work sessions, help developers in a direction that we think is going to not cause problems down the road. So that's just a general approach that we take. And, everybody, as my my co-chair or vice chair, is fond of saying that everybody in the city deserves good design. It doesn't matter whether you're in subsidized housing, workforce housing, or market rate housing. Everybody deserves a quality place to live. So that's sort of a general overview of how we approach things, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
I have two quick questions, and then I'll pass it to my colleagues. My first question is, and I have to ask this because of the reason that we even got to this point. Do you believe that there are biases related to affordable housing and accepting affordable housing on the Planning Commission?
I do not. Categorically do not.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
I know all other 6 members pretty well. We have 2 new members who I don't know particularly well, but in any other discussions we've had, there's nobody on the commission that would not be in favor of affordable housing in any part of the city.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And I
Yeah.
had to ask just because.
Yeah.
Yeah. My second question is, you mentioned the comp plan and, trying to align the housing goals with all of these plans, with the comp plan, is also with other projects that are going on. But I get very worried that affordable housing is left out of that. I know that is, Mr. Lashinsky's been working very hard to include that in a number of different ways. And when I say affordable housing, I'm not just saying public or subsidized, but housing affordability, exactly what we used in, housing affordability is being left out of that. And even more so, and the reason I listed certain properties on this list is because when I look down our current list of projects in the city, nothing really outside of the Willows, unless I'm overlooking something in the Newtown 20 project that was approved, I'm not seeing much affordable housing. Now, that's nobody here's fault, because obviously you don't bring forth the designs and proposals. But how can we, because the council's, we've passed legislation saying, hey, we really want to focus on affordable housing in these areas. And, we really want plans to come to fruition on Forest Drive as it relates to housing affordability, et cetera. Do we have to maybe, put that in another resolution with stronger verbiage to kind of mandate project decisions within the authority of the planning department? Is that something that you all are able to do? If we were to say today, or if there was a resolution passed by the council saying, with all remaining parcels of land, we'd like to see it dedicated to some form of affordable housing or housing affordability for low to moderate income families. Is that something that is within the power of the department or even the commission?
Well, that's certainly not within the purview of the planning commission, because we can only react to what's in the law. And as you know, the legislators create that law. But my personal opinion is very much of what is in our code sets up certain incentives for certain kinds of developments. And if you want to encourage that sort of development, you have to make sure that you have the right incentives in the law, so that there's basically an economic incentive for a developer to bring a project that includes, whether it's all or partially mixed affordable housing. They have to have an economic incentive that makes them want to do that. And I think, in my personal opinion, is a lot of what's in our code now, the economic incentive is to go towards the high end. And, that's not something that we as a commission can change. You have to think about what's in the law.
And I think that's something we can take on. As it relates to the department.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of add to what the chairman said, that I think you should feel a little better about the fact that our current codes include incentives, based on density for providing more affordable units. For the list of the projects that you had highlighted, Chair, for us to talk about tonight. Most of them have inclusionary housing units that are required, and maybe the rest of the staff can talk about the specifics in detail. They're more familiar with the projects than I am. I think it'd be good for Eric to also talk a little bit about how affordable housing and just having more housing, which helps everyone in Annapolis, is really a big part of the vision of the upcoming comprehensive plan. So why don't we touch on some of those?
Yeah, thank you. Chair Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning with the Planning and Zoning Department. If you go back to the 2009, our last adopted comprehensive plan, in that plan, we already were identifying affordability as a need, and there are recommendations toward creating additional housing options for low to moderate income households. It didn't get into the specific details I think we are getting into with our current update for the next comprehensive plan, which is going to go into far greater detail. And frankly, we're in a different economic climate today than we were in 2009. The city is significantly more expensive to live in. We have a greater shortage of housing, everything you know. And the Affordable Housing Task Force studied recently. And so one thing that we're getting into with the current comprehensive plan update, that I think is important to acknowledge, that our current zoning code just generally makes it very difficult to create multifamily housing. And when you think about creating affordable housing in today's Annapolis, where the land values are so high, that is very nearly impossible to create affordable housing for low to moderate income households on the sort of lot sizes that are enshrined in our zoning code. Basically, the parameters for development in the city today. You can only really do that through multifamily housing, essentially apartment type units or smaller units than a typical single family home. And so when you look at development patterns over the last 10 years, there's very, very few multifamily developments that have been built in Annapolis. Some of the only ones that we can point to are the Oberry Court redevelopment on Clay Street, which really only yielded, I think, an additional 20 units more than what was there previously. Prior, in the earlier College Creek Terrace development, there have been some rehabs of other buildings that became condo properties, but not necessarily affordable. We have the recent Town Courts development on West Street, which is 42 affordable units, but very few multifamily units. And in fact, I prepared a presentation about this, when we were doing our redistricting task force, to give that task force, the ward boundaries and redistricting task force, some sense of how the city has changed in the last 10 years in terms of population and new residents. And it was sobering to see how few multifamily developments have happened in the city. So I think, that's where we need to start, in terms of creating more multifamily opportunities. And that's really, how do we do that? I mean, the approach that we're taking in the comp plan update is by looking at the infill redevelopment opportunities in the city, where that's really essentially where we can create new housing, and looking at zoning districts for commercial and office use that could reasonably support residential uses as well as mixed use properties, and essentially changing those zones to encourage that kind of redevelopment. Mixed use is allowed in several of our commercial and office districts today, but not across the board, and not to the levels that I think we need to really create the housing that's in need. So,
yeah, if I can expand on that, I think a suggestion would be to make things like duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes much easier to build, even by right. And while I appreciate, I've looked at the new affordable housing workforce housing legislation. I appreciate where you're going with this, but that has and maybe this is a segue.
Let's
talking about that.
Really quickly before we jump into
Okay.
04022, because I'd like you, if you can, stay around for that discussion as well. Allow the alderman to ask this question, and then the alderwoman. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, one thing I do want to caution the body on in conversations of greater housing affordability is if we go no new development unless it's affordable by HUD's definition, below market, that can have an unintended consequence of maintaining the status quo. The housing crisis in Annapolis and the housing crisis nationwide is caused by a chronic lack of units. And my house that I live in now, which I bought for pretty reasonably, all things considered, used to be the brand new expensive model when it was first built. And it's those adding of new units sometimes, yes, even for wealthier families, that frees up, that keeps them from buying off a unit that a working class, middle class family might be able to afford. So that is one thing we need to keep in mind. But one of the key fundamental things that I do want to talk about, one in regards to our planning commission and one in regards to land use in the city of Annapolis. In regards to our planning commission, Chairman Pline, I appreciate you being here to represent the planning commission. I think you fundamentally have some of the best ideas on that commission of understanding what has caused our housing crisis, what has exacerbated a lot of our issues. You and I nerd out on zoning talks pretty consistently, and not many of us do that. I will say, in regards to Alderman Gay's question of, is there a bias against affordable housing? Maybe they wouldn't phrase it that way. I do think certain commissioners are anti-housing, to be frank. I won't get into specific points here with who I believe that they are, but actions that they have taken and comments that they have made for projects and ordinances that have come in front of your commission have made me go, they want the status quo maintained.
I will say that in terms of the members of the commission, we don't all think the same way, for sure. And we all have areas of interest that are different. And I think that's good because, if we all had the same focus areas, things would other areas would be left undone. And, some people have more of an interest in architecture. Some have more interest in site design, transportation. Some have more interest in environmental, stormwater management, those kinds of things. And I think, as a whole, perhaps some of the focus on any of one of those particular areas could come off as anti-housing, perhaps because of the focus on those issues around their focal area, whether it's maybe it's recreational space or environmental issues. Again, because most of what happens here is infill. Everything's going to be a trade-off, and we have to always try to make the best sausage we can. So I encourage you to look at it through that lens, perhaps. I don't know if that changed.
We all think differently is a great and accurate statement. Moving on to that, though, one of the things that I was very excited to talk about in this forum in regards to the biggest burden to housing affordability in the city of Annapolis is something that you and Mr. Lashinsky have touched on, and we're seeing this especially when it comes to the new proposed projects. Grisham Square, Rocky Gorge, Parkside Preserve is another fantastic example of this. These new projects, and also the majority of the land in the city of Annapolis, is zoned R1 or R2, which by Annapolis standards means single unit house. It dictates that the biggest minimum lot size be set. In the case of Rocky Gorge and Parkside Preserve, literally R1A and R1B. Those are R1B's over a quarter acre minimum lot size. Isn't that correct?
I think it's around, I think it's about 7,000 square feet. Is that right?
Which increases the cost because of the land is the biggest driving cost in housing factors. And then you also look at some of the other things that add to the cost of these things. Things such as, y'all gonna roll your eyes, but parking requirements. Parking requirements do add 5 to 15, in the case of a structured parking, even more than, to the cost of housing, whether that be in rent or outright purchasing. Minimum lot size, by mandating more land get used, you essentially ensure that higher prices get paid. Height limits. Height limits are something that can potentially cut off units that could go into it. And that adds cost because you now have less people buying into the land. I got on a roll, my man, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Just finish really quick.
Setback requirements by, again, dictating more land get used for essentially the lawn, which was created to go into the history of it, to go, look how much money I have land that I don't even need to do anything with. These things add cost and add problems. Our Affordable Housing Task Force Needs Assessment Report got into this very well when it came to zoning reform being required. I am currently in the process of drafting a bill to, one, legalize smaller scale development when it comes to minimum lot size reform, setback reform, and parking requirement reform for residential. That is in the very early stages. Our code has a lot of junk that we have to clear through. And I am, as I explicitly ran on, going to be putting in a bill within the next year to legalize missing middle housing, such as the quadplex. If we do not touch these things, we will not address our housing shortage.
Well, that's the point where I just wanted to step in just so we could keep the conversation going quickly. That's what puzzles me. We know all of these things exist. I mean, I knew that when I was in high school here in Annapolis. I could look around and say, oh, I'll never be able to afford to live here. They're not building housing for me. That was a decade ago. And so I think the biggest thing, and obviously everybody here is not to blame, but it just makes me question. Well, I guess it just, I mean, the will of the council wasn't in the place, but it's frustrating because now we're at a point where we either have to play catch up or come in with strong mandates or take years to now go through the city code and do these bills one at a time like we're doing right now with 04022. I'll be 45 before I can buy a house in Annapolis. You know, it's insane. And so I don't want to get into pointing fingers at who didn't do what back in the day, but
to be frank, Mr. Chairman, honestly, I think the state needs to intervene, just like in California, Maine, and Oregon. They've taken it seriously, especially California, as of the past 2 years. But up until recently, people have not been questioning this. And by not changing the zoning code, when we look at the high cost of housing here in the city of Annapolis, something that this body, I'm not pointing fingers at individual members, but the legislative body of the Annapolis City Council, we are the bad guy.
So can I offer sort of a generic suggestion on that? And this is a comment that I made in the Ignite talk I gave in 2019 towards the end, which I'm, at the risk of self-promotion here, I encourage you to go to YouTube and watch it, because even after 2.5 years, I think it still has stood the test of time. But one of the comments that I made is about the kinds of change that can happen. And if we allow smaller incremental change to happen with lower friction and don't sort of like fight everything, we'll have a smoother change, and it'll happen in a way that doesn't get people riled up. But if we fight everything, then the change that we get is, it ends up being large and disruptive. And that's essentially what people are fighting against. So, and not to steal the thunder from this workforce housing legislation, is, you know, if you all of a sudden tell people, well, okay, you can put R4 density in an R1 neighborhood, people are going to react to that, because that's a pretty radical kind of change. And so,
but is it the right to react? Because
what I'm saying is, philosophically, if you make changes to our rules that allow smaller change to happen with much lower friction, you're gonna get there maybe in the same time frame, but it's going to happen in smaller chunks versus nothing big. And that's generally what people react really negatively to, is really disruptive change.
I find that extremely hard to believe, and that's one of the biggest issues I have, is that we couldn't even get ADUs through this thing without, you know, the pitchforks and fire coming through.
Well, I mean,
I don't think small. I think,
but that's part
in the case of Annapolis. I agree with my colleague radically that you got to go big, because you've got to put your arms out, grab everything that you can, and move forward. Otherwise, you'll be in court for 10 years over, 96 apartment units, and that's not fun.
a lot of what's the task incumbent on all of us is to get people to accept smaller change, and that's something that I've advocated for
I'm a firm
things that
believer
I've said.
Yeah.
both are necessary. We need to allow the small scale change while also finding areas and projects that can move the ball a little bit forward. But
Alderwoman?
I'll yield
Yeah.
my
No,
time.
yeah,
Thanks. I have
we're on time.
3 things to say, not necessarily questions. On the article, I wasn't totally in alignment with my colleagues on that. I saw that as equitable. I saw the Planning Commission looking at a project as they would in any other project, even if it came down to window trim details. Because everybody deserves to look to live in a house, in a home that has been given that attention. And I didn't think there was any, bias. There's opinions, there's, when you get into details and stuff, but it was an equitable review. Why would you want it to be treated any differently? And it also followed the comprehensive plan. And I'm telling you, I can't emphasize enough how critical this comprehensive plan is. And to address all of our issues, it has to be our roadmap, or we're all going to be going into different directions. And it was so good to hear Alex say, I look at the comprehensive plan. And for the public who are listening, affordable housing is huge in the comprehensive plan. It has 4, bear with me. Goal 1, increase the supply and diversity of housing types in the locations where such housing can be compatible. But under each goal, they have action plans, amending the zoning ordinance bit by bit. I'm just telling you, I feel really optimistic with these people at the table, Eric Lashinsky, Alex, Michael Laplace, Jackie Rouse, Teresa. I feel optimistic that we're finally going to get it right. I do, if we all follow that plan. I know we all, it's a plan and we're going to put it on our shelf. Do you know how much work has been put into this plan, how much outreach? They get it. Eric gets it. And if we don't have a plan, if we have nothing, and I have that issue in Ward 1. I am such a stickler about, the genesis of these plans and the genesis of design and the compatibility. I just want to commend you for that, and I'm your biggest cheerleader on this comprehensive plan and getting there. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere. And Alex is completely right. You plop that out to the public. The Forest Drive sector study was a perfect example. That was a great study. It would have solved all of our problems on Forest Drive, but we plunked it. And it was, oh my God, we're going to have, there were flyers on trees saying that we're going to have high rise. It was talk about racism. It was just awful.
It's part of that study. It was in that group.
And so what happens then? We don't follow a plan. And they're going to get well, I shouldn't mention independent businesses, but they're going to get crap, sporadic crap of whoever can afford these little parcels of land. So I'm just telling you, it's such a critical issue that we have to trust the process. And I have patience to do that. I do. But you have to, in turn, help me. When I say I trust the code, I trust the genesis of the code, I trust the zoning, I need planning and zoning to be right behind me and say, yeah, that's why it went from the sector study to this and this. I can't rip that stuff up. It's really important. So I just want to say I feel positive, and I want you to trust the process. They're not the enemy. They're not the enemy. We're all in this together, and Eric is making a pathway for this to happen, affordable housing.
I will say I do very much think that the people at this table are very intelligent and are very much trying to be part of the solution.
Dwan?
Teresa went to Harvard, so everybody up there is smarter than me on this issue. And like I said, I don't have any beef with what all is being proposed. I think the comprehensive plan is great. I just get worried. I mean, you have the action plans laid out. We know what we need to do. I kind of spoke with Teresa about this a couple weeks ago. Is it too much to carry everything at once? to say, okay, well, we know that we want to get 04022 done. We know that we need to put in place some sort of pilot program. We know that we need what was the third action or?
Well, it says amend the zoning ordinance to
Okay,
encourage multiple housing types that can fit compatibly within each of the city's residential zoning districts.
So, yeah, so do we need to? Let's just move on because I don't think we're getting.
We're doing good.
Yeah.
We've got legislation
All right.
coming up.
Yeah. Let's move on. But it's just I want to be optimistic like you, but I also have I've just lived in reality in this city, and so
I know.
it's
I know.
unfortunate.
We
Let's.
have failed. I know.
Dewan, so I'd just like to make one comment about, I think one of the things that we've started to explore with 040 is that a solution to affordable housing has to go beyond just zoning changes. There are a lot of other things that go into whether or not someone can afford to build affordable housing. And we found that out with the ADU ordinance, where we're getting very few ADUs because we've changed the zoning, but the cost of building the units and extending the capital facility charges, et cetera, make it very difficult for people to engage in the process of building an ADU. There are other factors that we're going to have to look at beyond just zoning to make it possible to get more affordable housing. We have very tough forest conservation laws and stormwater management laws in the city, which everybody wanted because of the environment, but that also makes it very expensive to develop. And I think, so we may have to start looking at some of those other things. Our capital facility charges are really considerable for building a new unit. I think we figured out they're like $25,000 to add a unit. And so that's something we're going to have to start exploring. It's affordable housing. It's a multifaceted, it's a toolbox of things. Mm-hmm. Workforce housing is just one tool to put in the toolbox. We've put ADUs in, and Brooks has touched on some other things that we need to do to put into the toolbox. And we do need zoning changes, especially along Forest Drive. But there's a reason why the land along Forest Drive that we was zoned with such ridiculous densities, and it's because the way the state law is written about annexation is that when you annex property into the city, you have to have compatible zoning to what it was zoned in the county. And a number of years ago, what the county did to discourage development in areas along Forest Drive is they downzoned everything along Forest Drive into these really low density zones, so that when we annexed it, we had to do comparable zoning, and you can't change the zoning on that property for 7 years after it's annexed. Well, people who were, annexing property, they wanted to develop it right away. That's kind of the pattern. They acquired, like Parkside Preserve, the original developer, that he bought up all of that property piece by piece by piece, he was stuck with the zoning that that the county had put on it. So there's a logic to all of this. But yes, we do need to re-examine how all of the property in the city, the residential property, is zoned. And I think Eric's working on that.
Let's go, Ellie, and then
real quick. I don't want to underestimate what I think Alex said. That these are infill developments, and the land that's left to develop, it's either A, a crappy site, or B, it was something that needs help me with the word, remediation. Yeah, I mean, that's the conundrum that we're in. We wrote that resolution for Spa Road, and yeah, there's remediation. I mean, how are we going to do that? So we have to be creative with the mixed use. But one thing that, not to belabor this, but one point in the comp plan that's so critical is ask the county for help. We gotta ask for the county for help. We gotta work with them, because ultimately, when we build affordable housing, we're going to be moving people. We don't have places to move them. We just have to work with the county.
I don't think they know what affordable housing is either.
Well, we're going to teach them.
Well, I think this, this, we're at
Hold on, really quickly. Yeah, just because. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, awesome. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I think our relationship with the county right now is at a peak, point of cooperation, partnership, and I do sense, we have obviously an election in November, but we have a lot of shared interests right now. I gave a presentation to the county's Region 7 Planning Stakeholder Advisory Committee the other day, and I really reiterated the need for the county to support the city in producing more affordable housing, particularly in the parole area. I mean, I think they get it. I mean, they have we're going to talk about our legislation soon, but it tried to build on something the county had done last year, which I think ours is has some things that might make it more effective, but they're trying, I think, for the first time in a while. So
That's awesome. All right, so let's wrap this piece up so that we can move on really quickly. What's the plan with, and I'm not asking this to the Planning Commission Chair because I don't want to cross any boundaries, but as it relates to the Willows project, my understanding is that there is a tight timeline for financial assistance. Is the planning department aware of that? And are there plans in place to help them meet the need for the deadline of funding? I was told that it was somewhere at the end of this year, October, November-ish, with a need to get on the agenda, I think, at the next Planning Commission meeting in October. Where does that stand?
They have to do a revised submittal. That's where they are right now.
Okay, so because the last one, it was recreation. It was they were like three things that they had to go back and do, which I'm assuming that they're in the process of doing. So
Right.
once they turn that in, would they be eligible then to?
Well, they have to, they submit a revised submittal, it goes out for agency review. There are a number of agencies that have to review that. But in addition to that, they do not yet have APF approval. And I think the most challenging one at this point in time for them to have is from the police department. And they need to be working with the police department on some kind of a mitigation agreement to get that approved. I think, but I don't think they have
Mitigation for?
under the adequate public facilities ordinance. Police is based on the number of police officers that so if you can't meet that, which they can't do because no one can meet it, then you can work with the police department to have a mitigation agreement where you provide something in lieu of that. And they have, my understanding from Mr. Smith is that because he followed up with the police chief recently about this, is that they have not yet even sat down with the police department on that aspect.
So how does a project like Rocky Gorge that was, what was it, 2006 introduced? How do they get I'm assuming they're operating under the approval of 2006. How does that slide? But an affordable housing project where we obviously need it,
Right.
and we can't figure out a way to get can the agencies not all get in a meeting like this and say, all right, bam, this is what we got on the table. This is what police need. Here are the recreation requirements. Bam, let's leave out of here. Let's get it on the agenda on the 10th or whenever they meet in October, and let's rock and roll. Is that not?
Well, I don't know that it has worked that way in the past. Maybe that's something that we need to look at again in terms of modifying APF. Why is APF for police tied to the total number of officers in the city? I mean, instead of, there are other factors they could be tied to. The reason it's tied to that is when we originally adopted APF, that was what they decided they wanted to do. Whereas if you look at like the fire department, they've tied it to response times. So maybe we need to go back and look at APF again in terms of making that, because that one part of APF seems to be the most challenging for anybody to meet. Okay. So we would agree with that.
Awesome, yeah, because I just want to get this.
Well, anyway, I understand that you want to get it scheduled. Mr. Smith has talked with them. They're scheduled to go to hearing considering the fact that they have yet to submit their revised submittal and it hasn't gone out for agency review. It's not going to be going to hearing in October. Tom is hoping that they'll be able to go to the second meeting in November to Planning Commission, but a lot of this depends on them submitting, them getting their submittal in and getting it out for review. So, but I think Teresa can explain to you a little bit about the whole deadline thing with
The funding?
the funding.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Could I just interject though I just don't want to lose the adequate facilities legislation. We really have to put that on our to-do list.
Yes.
Michael,
One
Eric.
thing
I mean,
that-
seriously, look at hello. I mean, we know the legalities that we've gotten into with it. And I've asked, I have asked the police about where did these ratios come from, and I don't get answers.
It came from the original, when we adopted APF, each department that was participating in the scheme of APF was asked to develop their own standards for adequate public facilities.
Wow. How
And
long
the
ago
police
was that?
chief,
Yeah.
they decided that they wanted to base it on the total number of officers, and that was what was approved by the city council. It's proved to be very problematic.
Yeah. And not real.
And it's been an area where that has been challenged in court.
Right.
So yes, it does need to be changed. I think there was a point in time when Sally Dr. Nash, our previous director, was working with the different departments on maybe modernizing the APF a little bit and bringing it up to date, but that did not move forward for whatever reason.
And it has hindered new development.
So let's go really quickly, Brooks, so we can get this out of the way, and then we'll jump to finance with Teresa.
Just on a quick thing on APF, and I think we're definitely going to be seeing the evidence for this with the Urban 3 study when that comes out shortly. One of the things about our adequate public facility ordinances is it essentially forces lower density development when it does actually occur. And that ends up exacerbating the very problems that it attempts to serve, because we essentially do not get the return on investment when new development occurs. What we're going to see from the Urban 3, my theory, which is backed up by literally every other city that did the study, is it's going to show low density development. We actually lose money on providing these public services versus higher density development. We gain money providing these services. So because we've put in so much low density development to follow our APF laws along with other things, we have essentially hindered our public facilities that we are trying to make adequate.
Let's do the financing really quickly, and then I'm just gonna jet through these last three so that we can move on, because we really got to get to 040. I want to get everybody ahead on time. Okay,
That's right.
I know.
As far as DHCD is concerned, Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development provides the tax credits, and when an organization wins the tax credits, they're given a letter, and the letter has a whole list of all the milestones that they have to meet before they can go to settlement. We have a copy of the letter. We have a list of the milestones. We'll be in touch with DHCD. But it's been my experience, like with the development of town courts, I don't know how many remember that or were around, but it took a little bit longer than it was supposed to, and they still moved forward and still were able to complete construction. So one thing I would like to say, I don't think the city's done that shabbily in terms of developing affordable housing. I think we should give ourselves some credit. I mean, we have 42 units at town courts. Most of the public housing has been redeveloped or redone or rehabilitated. We have the Willows project, which is going to be 58 units. We have another project that just got tax credits on Admiral Drive, Conifers project. Do you remember how many units that is? It's over 100. And that's not going to meet zoning, but if we can get these zoning changes, maybe all these projects can meet zoning. And we also have the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative. So I think we're doing
Okay.
pretty good.
Okay. I love the optimism. I really do. So let's, okay, yeah, really quickly, let's run down this and then we're moving on to 04022. 108, 106 and 108 Annapolis on the list of updated projects. It says they are exempt from MPDUs, but they have 11 units unless that's a typo.
Yeah, I think it's 4 units.
Okay,
Upstairs.
okay. Awesome. Yeah, just wanted to make sure there. Parkside Preserved, 19 MPDUs. I think there's, no?
Right now, there's 3 for sale, and they just added another 3, so it's going to take a while to do all 19.
And what's the price tag on that? For
The price tag right now on those is $350. They're 4-bedroom townhomes, $350 and change.
And that, while that is affordable, the qualifications on the MPDUs disgust me because it's like,
This is for middle income. This is for our missing middle people.
I know. I think that is, and that's the problem. It's so hard to explain to people that are actually homeless and desperately in need of these things that like, oh, well, this is only for, this group, or, well, we got to change the zoning. So give me 2 years and maybe we'll be able to get you a house. It's like, it's so frustrating, but let's close discussion
But
on.
that's a good story though, because we got rid of fee in lieu of and we have units.
No, somebody's paid a fee in lieu of on here.
They're not supposed to.
That was
That was-
Thomas Woods, I think.
Yeah, that was from way back.
Okay. All right.
So,
Baby
And that
steps.
was a big progressive step to
Yeah.
eliminate that fee in lieu.
Yeah.
Because everybody wanted to pay the fee.
Oh, God, we were late. That was.
Okay. Yeah. I see that. Yeah, it says approved. So, okay. All right.
I think the city, though, has developed programs for all income levels. I mean, we have programs for people at really low incomes. We have programs, middle income. We've done a lot of acquisition rehab, especially in the Clay Street neighborhood and around the city, for people that are at about 60% of median. So, again, I'm optimistic, and I think we're, that we have a lot of programs that meet all the different levels of need.
Let's, unless there are any other questions on this, awesome. Next item on the agenda we'll move on to is, oh wow, of course my agenda's not pulled out right now. Next item on the agenda, 04022 workforce housing for the purpose of allowing workforce housing as permitted use subject to standards in certain residential, commercial, office, and mixed-use districts, establishing standards for workforce housing and generally related zoning. I actually want to allow Cynthia to kick this off from the top just to catch us up to speed on what the legal concerns were and why we're at this process, and also understanding correctly, after tonight, there are we got to get this thing on the agenda. And so that's why I thought it was just important to have everybody here so we can, walk exactly for the October 10th. Yeah.
Because we already recommended it, didn't we?
I thought we did, yeah.
Is it still not on first reading?
No.
Oh, that's actually good because it lets me make a change.
Yeah.
What are you doing with it?
I hope you're putting your part.
We can make handouts, and everybody can have it printed out of the original 25 to the edit.
After this, it goes to.
So it has gone in. It'd probably go to rules.
She says what?
Because substantial amendments.
Is this substantial? I mean, it's the same language and the same premise of the bill where we're clarifying. Yeah, you're right. We can vote on that. Well, I'll save the debate on why I don't believe it's substantial later. But please catch us up on where we were, what happened, and while we're here, everybody's got their copies. We're gonna, go through, address everybody's concerns, and then we'll be out of here just in time for Thursday Night Football, okay?
But you have to watch it on Prime. Oh, I'm on mic.
Ready? So go ahead, please, Cynthia.
So the handouts, just so everybody, the first one is the original, which is the one that was introduced. Underneath of that, you'll see is something that's headed revised. That was the version that we worked with the Office of Law on making changes to, and it does include adding the reduction in fees. And then the third one, which is called edits, just sort of, if you go through that, you'll see it's color-coded at the top, so you can see what was added from between the original and the revised would be in blue, and the yellow is changes, and the red is stuff that we deleted. So a lot of it had to do with sort of moving stuff around, but there were things that we added in the revised legislation also. And I think that what we thought was going to happen with the legislation, and I think was that the original was going to be withdrawn and the revised was going to be introduced, and then we would just move forward with the revised, which the revised version reflects the changes that we worked with HHW on in prior meetings. Remember when you had that, you wanted some changes to it. Those are all incorporated into the revised, including the adding 1728-090, which actually lowers the fees. It's I think it's at the top of page 2, where we the fees for workforce housing shall be 50% of the requirement. And that would be an example of one of the things that I was talking about a little while ago, about how we need to look at some other things besides zoning, to make housing more affordable.
That's awesome, and I appreciate that. So Cynthia, when we were looking through Cynthia or Ms. Ruder, what do you prefer on the mic?
Cynthia's fine.
Okay, awesome. When we we're working off of the revised version right now. Any amendments that we make tonight all have to be in one, correct?
Correct. All right, so the original was submitted by Alderman Gay as first reader on June 27th. As has already been mentioned, it's been revised 3 times. So rather than having a lot of different amendments and having to reintroduce the bill, Alderman Gay has decided that we would move forward on the process as it's happening. Alderman Gay is going to gather all the changes together, all the recommended amendments together and from this committee, and he is going to put it into one almost final document.
What page is that?
That document needs to go to the Planning Commission. It also needs to go to the Rules Committee. And depending upon how many changes are made and what the committees decide, it may need a second hearing unless the committee decides it does not need a second hearing.
I don't understand.
So we're going to go through this bill page by page very quickly, because we've done it a number of times, address all of our concerns. We've got some things that need to be added or some things that need to be removed. That'll be introduced as one amendment. It'll be our final version, and that'll be the version that we submit to for public hearing and then to the city council and so on.
All right, the reason you do it this way is because of all the changes that have been made to it. Any one piece of section of the bill can only be amended twice. So if planning and zoning amends the same section twice, they take up all the amendment ability away from the council. So what Alderman Gay is going to do, he's going to put together what's called a substitute amendment, or it's also called a manager's amendment. And that leaves, so that's a complete change of, it totally replaces the original bill. That leaves council members the opportunity to amend any portion of the bill.
So what we're looking at, I don't know if you have it, that's called edits. that will be an amendment. That would be a composite amendment?
That would be a section that Alderman Gay then inserts into the bill if he is, and if the committee is okay with it.
But no matter what, the bill will have an amendment. It will be okay.
It will be like a rewritten bill with all these changes in it.
But you mentioned planning commission and rules in city government, and you didn't. Did you know that?
Well, I know that it had to go to the planning commission. I wasn't aware of rules.
Yeah.
I thought we were the only standing committee.
Right. Why does it go to rules?
Because of the sections of code that it amends.
It's a zoning change.
Okay.
Rules
Oh,
handle
that.
zoning.
All right. Well, let's start. And if
Brooks is on a rule, so.
the problems that pop up will go. Just so we're all clear, we're all on the revised version, okay? Because the amendments are not this. The edits in this are not, okay.
Okay.
The one that says edits it's actually the same as revised.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a couple of mismatches, but
No, it's,
It's just color codes. It's just color.
oh, Mike, Jackie, Mike.
And things are a little spread out.
okay. All right. So are we? Let's just go to page 2 because the first is
Okay.
just generally an introduction of the sections of the code. Elijah, please feel free to join us at the table, as well as any other members that helped work on this bill in our committee. Thank you.
I meant to include you when I said, the A team and you too, the whole A team.
And Teresa, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Okay, so be established by the Annapolis of the Code shall be amended to read as the follow. Title 17, Building and Construction, Plumbing Code, Schedule. The change that is being made, the addition is, the charges for issuance of permits are the sum of connection charge, a capital facility charge, a capital facility assessment charge, and installation charge. The charges shall be recommended to the City Council by the Director of Public Works and collected by the Director of Planning and Zoning, except that fees for workforce housing shall be 50% of the requirement. And so this is essentially saying once they present whatever or once they get their plan together for development or whatever, the fees will just then be sliced in half.
Right, you pay these fees when you apply for your building permits. These are the fees that you have to pay.
So the upfront fees, okay.
So they're the upfront fees, yes.
Awesome. Any comments on this section?
No, good,
Awesome, we're good there?
good.
Title 21, Planning and Zoning, Chapter 21, Use Tables. Any need to explain any of this here?
We never had any recommended changes to the tables of uses in any of the discussions, unless you have some recommendation at this
Alderman?
point.
With the new comprehensive plan potentially expanding out mixed use, would we need to add MX into the use table as well?
It's in there.
is. It's
If you go to the bottom of the page, it says 2148-030
Page
Table of
3.
Uses, Office and Mixed-Use Zoning Districts.
I was on page 2 and missed that part, so
Right.
thank you
It's just
very much.
because the way it bleeds over. We put it in every single district with the exception of
R3,
I-1. I don't know why it's not in R3R here.
yeah, that was gonna be my
Right, it
question.
should, I thought we put it in all the residential districts. So on the page 2, that first table, 010, we need to put it in under R3R also.
Okay, hold on, because I want to make sure we're keeping track of the changes.
I'm just drawing a big circle on my thing.
Okay. But where at?
Okay, well, I'm on page 2, sort of the middle of the page where it says section 2148-010, Table of Uses, Residential Zoning Districts. And then if you look, it's P-STD, all the way over till you get over to R3R, which is blank. If it's blank, it means it's not proposed there, and we want it there too.
Okay, so add, and that was going to be my stupid question. PTS or PSTD. Explain.
Permitted, subject to, STD always stands for standards.
Okay.
And P is permitted.
Awesome. So permitted based on the standards of.
Right, so then when you look at the totality of all the zoning districts, it's in all the residential zoning districts. It's in all the commercial and industrial districts except for the I-1, and it's in all of the office and mixed-use districts, which is all the districts that we have in the city with the exception of our open space district.
And maritime.
Yeah.
And the maritime districts. We did not put it in the maritime districts.
So subject to standards means that it does go through a special exception process?
No, we're going to get to that.
Okay,
It's in the next section.
okay, because that symbol usually means.
Standards, right. It means there's a whole chapter of the code that's called, it's chapter 2166, 64,
standards, yeah.
which is standards for uses subject to standards. And
Right.
whenever there's a use in the use table that has an
Right.
STD next to it, then you go to that 2164 and you can look and see what the standards are for that use. Sometimes, a use will appear in a use table as an S-STD, which means it is a special exception subject to standards. But if it's P-STD, it means it's a permitted use just subject to those standards.
Okay.
Yeah,
'cause
so just look for the S.
The S is the one that gets the special.
Right.
Okay, I got it.
Alderman, did you have any?
No.
Okay.
My question was addressed. And
I didn't mean to scare you. The special exception process.
So we're moving on to page 3?
Yep.
Okay, so we deleted the sentence where it says the project, we deleted some portions of this, and this was, all the ones that are highlighted in red, that was deleted.
Okay. So the project shall consist of any mix or type of dwelling units. So everything in between that was deleted, or just the two?
No, just where the red is
Okay, okay.
deleted.
And then below is
And then the changes we made in this section are the two numbers that are highlighted in yellow, and we changed that number to 120%
Because we want to do everything. Typically, the workforce housing is at 120% or lower. So we wanted to make sure that we included all workforce housing types.
You had a question?
On this front, in this case, did we, in that case, eliminate, in this new edition, did we eliminate like deed restrictions for selling of a workforce housing unit to ensure that it's 120% or lower?
Similar to the MPDU thing?
Yeah.
Is that in here?
We addressed transfer somewhere.
It is in there. It's under A1.
Okay.
A1?
Yep, there it is. Sorry. Okay, cool.
So by changing it,
Oh, okay, I
it
see.
was
15 years, yeah.
100%, and we changed it to 120 to make it more flexible.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
And that was something I think that HHW also wanted, as well as the committee with the long name.
Housing and Community Development Equity Commission.
And it's just consistent.
Thank Alderman Rodriguez for that.
I
Okay?
think there needs to be an ordinance to change it to a shorter name.
we
that
might,
doesn't-
we
that
might
I
can go
personally
back.
can remember.
We might
Doesn't
can go
even have a
back to
good
just Housing
acronym.
and Community Development. You know?
Yeah.
The acronym, you just use the initials.
Just a quick question, really quickly. For bullet 2 or A2, the 40% of the homeownership units occupied households with an income not exceeding 120%. I need just clarity on what the numbers would be for homeownership in particular. My fear is that I don't want to get into a situation like the MPDUs where it's so unattainable that the families that are significantly below that wouldn't be eligible at some point. You understand my question there?
Let me take a stab at that.
This is like being on a quiz show.
Y'all doing good though.
What is so the legislation, in my view, is targeting two types of developers. It's targeting ones that are bringing low income tax credits with them and are specifically targeting lower income households, under 60% in some cases. But it's also targeting it's providing incentive to developers who are going for more market rate housing. And in that case, being able to offer units that go up to 120% gives them more incentive to provide that missing middle housing for workforce households, where if they don't have that incentive, they're going to be making it affordable to people making 140% or even higher. And so it just gives them more incentive to provide like a middle income option. But
And you're specifically talking about bullet 2, correct?
yes,
Okay,
I mean,
perfect.
basically, we can't guarantee that the units are going to be affordable to the lowest income households, but we're giving some flexibility to these developers, and so the ones that have the low income tax credits are going to be bound to do that. But
Do you know that number offhand?
That's what I was just about to. No, you're totally fine.
Yeah.
what number?
What's the median income?
Oh, it's about 100,000.
Depends on the size of the household.
Okay.
So it's going to go up as you have more people in the household. Broadly speaking, in the county, household 4 area median income at 100% is, I believe, approximately $95,000.
So, and that's with the joint income. Okay.
Household income.
Okay. And you can't exceed that.
Can't exceed, this is written that you couldn't exceed 120.
Well, what would 120 be in a four?
It's by household size, so it's very hard to
1.2.
say.
1.2 times
That
95.
number.
Come to the mic.
We need a calculator.
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Maybe
Yeah.
110.
Thank you so much.
Wanted to contribute something.
No. You look.
Broadly speaking,
Your name's gonna be on all the buildings that we
my name's Elisha Herrick Blaine. I'm a member of the long name committee, co-chair of the Housing Affordability Task Force. Broadly speaking, 100% of area median income in the greater Annapolis, Anne Arundel County area in the metropolitan statistical area for this region is approximately $95,000 for a household of 4. Therefore, to calculate what 120 would be, you'd need to do 1.2 times 95,000, and that would give you what it is to have household income be at for these properties or underneath. So you're talking. I mean, that's
114, right?
at the risk of. I don't want to sidetrack this, so I'll stop there. I'll stop there.
I actually have a chart that I can send you all, so you can see.
Yeah, please. Because that like that they said, there's changes in household sizes and all that stuff, and so when I look at this, obviously I understand when you all say that this will be so that you don't exceed or you aren't making too less, and so that you're just right for this type of housing, whether it be rental or home ownership. And I appreciate that it was increased for the home or for the rental, but we'll get there in a second.
One thing on the 120%, I think that increased flexibility is very important because you do put a little more incentive on actually getting things built to change the current status quo and blockage. I'll also say that like the 120 for a family of 4, 114,000, a couple with 2 decent paying jobs, like still qualify in that, and they're still getting hit hard by the housing crisis. Like friends of mine, they're both teachers. They're both in that 110% income, but they're still having a hard time finding a home, and they're currently in the cost burdened category for rent. So,
And for what it's worth, I would acknowledge that 2 points are not mutually exclusive. They can be both true. The need exists at the lower end income spectrum. So the fact that there are more households that need housing who only have 30% or 50% of the area median income does not inherent. That's true. It is also true that developers need the flexibility in order to make projects pencil out. It is also true that you can have 2 income earners earning $60,000, and that's putting that household right at or potentially just above 120 AMI. So all 3 points are not inherently exclusive of one another. while they may appear to be so. So I think in aggregate, I think that's why we're, in addition to being in line with the comprehensive plan, we're coming at this, that's why this has landed in this place.
Are there any dangers, and so we can start to kind of move through this? My point is, if the bullet 2, eligible households for purpose of homeownership shall be at least 50% of the homeownership units, would that deter a developer away? You believe if it was increased to 50%?
I think it might have the unintended consequence of potentially placing fiscal inflexibility onto the developer, and perversely act as a disincentive, despite it having the intended consequence of incentivizing.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there.
It's almost like we're looking for the sweet spot,
I would agree, and I think that's the challenge with all of this is finding that sweet spot, and I think that's where everyone's in agreement on, and that's why we're landing at this income threshold.
It's always challenging finding a sweet spot for a millionaire, because they don't ever want to spend money. So, Alderman, did you have a point before we move on to the next page?
Nothing more on page 3. I have something on page 4.
Okay, awesome. So I think we're all good, even on the rental part. In 3, eligible households for a purpose of rental shall be at least 60%. That's much more, which is good. I'm satisfied there, but not exceeding 120% of the median income. Okay, that's perfect. 4, the initial transfer of a home ownership unit to the original buyer of that unit shall be accompanied by, this is being deleted. Okay.
So then we have the Brooks Amendment here in blue.
Hold on. What's 4? Property that meets requirements for set by these standards shall be exempt from the Okay,
right.
Yeah. Okay. And then 5, no parking shall be required for workforce housing, notwithstanding the requirements of 2166.
Current R4 parking requirements.
Okay.
So this would basically go, if you do R4 density with the workforce housing, you don't need any extra than R4 already requires. Can we get rid of the notwithstanding to the end of that portion, please? Because we're trying to put in like below market to just slightly above area median income. We really got to give them as much flexibility as we can.
The reason we put the notwithstanding in there is because that's code language, Brooks, that you have to cross-reference the other. If you're requiring something in another section of the code, if you're going to not require it in a specific zone, then you have to cross-reference that.
So
it just means that even though under 2166, it says you have to have this many parking spaces for this kind of housing and this for this, it's just really essentially saying that doesn't apply to workforce housing.
Okay.
It's secret code language.
This is
okay, good. So if someone were to be trying to build these below market units, they would not be held to the...
Right.
Yeah.
Developers understand a lot of the secret code language.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it doesn't
if they
really
don't,
make
we
sense to
explain
me,
it to them.
the way it's written.
Huh?
It does not make sense to me.
It didn't make sense to me either, but if it's getting what we want done,
It's our standard code language. I can give you numerous examples of where we've used it.
So just so explain it to me like I'm an idiot. So number 5 says basically that you have to meet the minimum parking requirements for R4.
No, it says no parking shall be required for workforce housing.
I think. But notwithstanding the requirements of 2166.
Yes, because under 2166, parking would be required for.
I can dumb it down for you,
units.
Alex. I'm really good at that. It just means no matter what the other thing says.
Right, it's like context, it's making a reference to.
Yeah.
We can think of some better way to write it, but we have to cross-reference. And that's kind of the standard way we do it,
But as it is currently written, we get the point across, though.
It
no
definitely
parking
says no parking.
required.
So the intent is.
Right.
Okay.
Not no
require
parking,
this.
period. None required.
Workforce housing does not require any parking.
Yeah, we can
That's what
rearrange the words in the first clause.
So somehow to make that so that.
Okay, we're happy.
A
yeah,
non-planner can make sense out of it would be.
We will
really
work
good.
with Cynthia on rearranging.
I'll
the
put
words.
that as an amend or one of our
Tweak.
Yeah.
It's going to be a tweak.
We'll put workforce housing, no parking requirements shall be, or shit. I mean, workforce housing, no parking shall be required. Workforce housing, no parking shall be required. Okay.
Should I get that?
Okay.
And 1 second, a really, really good question from Alderwoman Tierney, and I'm curious to see where you all stand.
I'm going to ask this really quietly so Rob Savage doesn't hear me. What are we doing for no net loss and stormwater requirements that are pretty restrictive and costly? I mean, all good intentioned, but
Right, well, we hadn't brought those up to date. I mean, I think we're all aware of how I think we waded into the waters with our reducing the capital facilities, but when I talked earlier about how we're going to have to maybe start looking at some other things that we require under the code, I think that's a separate topic, and I don't think we want to weigh this down so heavily when it goes to full council, that we get off into those tangents. That's just kind of
potentially
a strategy question.
Right, because potentially if there is a discussion about that, it will not necessarily hold this up because this is silent about it.
Right, I think that you want to. I think those are issues just like APF that we're at some point probably need, perhaps in conjunction with Eric's fabulous comprehensive plan.
What would be the low-hanging fruit, though, as it relates to environmental requirements on these projects? Because, again, that's where I start to get frustrated. It's like, why not add it in here, get it all out of the way at once instead of coming back with an entirely separate bill solely focused on environmental issues as it relates to workforce housing?
I don't know what those amendments would look like, and I think that would be something. Okay, if we start, but what I think is that if you start adding in to this amendments related to stormwater management.
And then it's substantial. You're right. Okay.
And in addition, they're going to have to go to other committees for review.
Yeah, okay. We should have added it in the beginning, but I get you, so that's good. All right, so let's go to B. Density setbacks and height requirements shall be governed by the bulk regulation for R4 zoning district under Title 21, 50, 100, and then it has common space. All of this is being changed?
We're adding a common open, no, this is just a standard that we're putting in that tells what the common open space needs, standards for common open space.
Okay. Open space shall provide.
And this was something that we talked about when we, in the many meetings we had about this. It essentially takes what was in the original legislation related to common open space and sort of, it expands it a little bit and divides it up into like 1, 2, 3, 4, but
that's gonna be a hiccup, number 2.
Okay, I was looking at 2 and 3, actually, yeah.
We just clarifying, and this is modeled on requirements we have in other zones related to what you don't want to just say you provide common open space. You want to have some parameters about it, about what it means to have common open space. Otherwise, what you wind up with is that in the days of yore, you'd get developers who would come in and they would just want to count like this little strip of land around the edge of their project and say, that's my common open space.
For number 3, common open space shall be in public ownership or covered by an open space easement or controlled by a homeowner association. I'm with the homeowner association, I'm confused and conflicted.
Well, homeowners association would be, almost all projects have a homeowners association. All development either that or they have a condominium association, which is a form of a homeowners association. They're just, homeowners association is kind of a generic term.
Is it fair to say that like at town courts, the management is essentially the homeowners association that manages the playground and the common open space there, would you say? Is that fair?
Is that totally a rental project?
I don't even know
it is. It is.
Could we, for ease of our mind, simply add homeowners association or property management?
Well, okay.
I was just worried about, how maybe something's built 10 years down the line, they have a homeowner association and like, all right, let's get rid of all the playgrounds and put, open patios or gazebos or, is that, give them that authority? Because it says common open space shall be in public ownership or covered by an open space easement or controlled by a homeowner.
Okay, so that's a glass half full way of looking at that. Is if you have a home, you know, say your project is built and initially it has a tennis court in the middle of the project, and you know, then all the homeowners, there's a homeowners association, and then 10 years down the road they say, well, you know, nobody uses the tennis court, and we want to change that. Under the homeowners association documents, they have a process that's created. They all get recorded in the land records so that they can figure out how they want to repurpose that homeowner, that whatever that is, so it will serve the whole community. So I think you do want to allow a homeowners association to be able to repurpose it. They can't just totally get rid of it.
Okay. Well, like if he said, if we put control by a property manager, the homeowners would still have vocal input in the decision-making process. So could we just for comfortability?
No.
This is something.
Well, we could say, or a property man, in the case of rental apartments, there would be a.
No, you have, no, we would have common open space in any project. Okay, I'm putting a big circle there, and let me just talk to Tom Smith and then look at, let me look at how they do it at town, how we set it up in town courts, and I'll come back with a suggestion.
Okay, that's totally fine, yeah.
I see but I think that's, but I don't have an answer right off the top of my head.
No problem.
Can I ask you just when in your mind is the situation that you are thinking of and trying to alleviate?
I'm really thinking about some of the water access issues that we've had in the past, where these homeowner groups have gotten together and basically have been like, if you don't look like me, don't come into my neighborhood and don't access my open space. And here's a gate. And so I'm very worried about that.
Okay, well, I think that has to, okay, so
same thing though, because water access is open space in a way.
But when open space is created in a project, if the intention of having common open space that is publicly accessible, that needs to be memorialized on the record plats for that project. So for example, Acton's Landing, their common open space is, a big part of it is that park with the metal ducts. And that is public, that's not just for their community, it's for the general public. The project, when we did Boucher Landing back in the 80s, and I know that's the one you're talking about, where it has the little strip that goes down to the water, that was not memorialized on the plats that it was going to be open to the public. And you know, so you just need to be more specific with your platting if the intention is, because some common open space is going to be just for the community.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have a project that's going to have open space that you want accessible to the public, we were doing that with Chesapeake Grove. That was being done, so there was some private common open space for the project, but there was going to be a little piece down there that was going to be publicly accessible to everyone.
Okay.
Before that project went away.
That does kind of make me, if it's included in the original deeds, you said it. So is that something that is typically regulated by law, or is it regulated by? Okay.
That would be something that would be done through the approval process for the project and more memorialized on the plats.
And so that's a definite, like if a project is to come up.
If that's the intention, if we wanted to have public common open space.
See, that's tricky, because what if we get, not all of you are clearly in favor of public open space, et cetera, but what if we get, you know, somebody in 15 or 20 years, a director that's like, no.
So I think that is a legitimate concern, and I think, you know, we will have a recommendation in our comprehensive plan that basically suggests that new public water access and new residential development should be public, maintained as public amenity. Okay. That's where the Planning Commission, in following the comp plan guidance, would say if
that's music to my ears.
Housing development is up for review and there is a private, you know, water access proposed, that they could say, well, comp plan is asking for public water access to benefit the greater good of the city. And then there would be a negotiation there, and, but that's where I think what Jackie is referring to, it would be sort of in that review process.
Okay.
Does the code have, and if it doesn't, it probably should have definitions for common open space and public open space in the zoning code?
As to what it is?
Yeah.
No.
It does not.
That we would want it to have.
I don't know if that would help things. I don't know if that would help things legally if we define them clearly in the code, or is it?
We did define public water access recently with the maritime rezoning, and that was partly because we were requiring new restaurants in the maritime zones to provide unconditional public water access, and we had to kind of explain what that meant, and it essentially meant that you didn't have to be a customer to use that space. And so like the boardwalk in front of, this was formalized prior to that, but the boardwalk in front of Chop Tank, for example, is an example of that, but so we do have public water access defined, but not common open space or public open space.
Maybe
Actually,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
There it is defined.
It is.
In 21-24-060, common open space plan developments shall provide for common open space as follows. May include parks, playgrounds, parkways, median landscape, green spaces, schools, community centers. There's 3 paragraphs on it.
Good.
A school is common open space?
School, use their facility.
No, because Eastport has no trespassing signs all around it. And that's interesting.
So we, and that.
Another parking lot item.
We used another, I think much of this language that we put in came out of the BCE zone, which has a provision about common open space. But one of the other things that's already in the code that may help is one of the standards for one of the site design standards, because workforce housing has to meet site design standards too. So there are standards under open space there, and one of them is consideration shall be given to dedicating open space land to the city in furtherance of the goals and purposes of the comprehensive plan, critical areas plan, and parks and recreation plan. The Annapolis Conservancy Board has been established to promote these goals and purposes, see Chapter 250 of the City Code. So that's already in the code, that you have to give consideration under site design. And I think that there's one of someplace, and I don't know where it is off the top of my head, we have something about projects need to comply with the comprehensive plan.
And I guess 4 addresses that. It says provision shall be made for the ownership, conservation, and maintenance of the common open space. So in a way, it is addressing what we have requested. And I also trust that at some point there'll be a change to the code so that the deed suggestion is just from the get-go, it should be public, space and so.
Without restrictions.
Yeah.
So the code also says that private common open space shall be equivalent to 20% of the total ground area in residential plan developments.
Yeah, but this is not a residential, doesn't apply.
And
to workforce
5% of the total ground area in business and special mixed plan developments.
So would that be an?
No, none of that applies to workforce housing. We did not set.
Oh, because we're defining workforce housing.
Right,
Okay,
and we did not set a minimum percentage requirement in here for workforce, for this permitted use subject to standards.
Can you send me the one you're reading from, Cynthia?
Minimum percentage, but
Could you send me that one though? That piece of the code though thank you.
That's
resident. That's regular residential, but I still want to just be able to look at that later though. Yeah.
Right, that's under
Plan development.
Plan development.
Okay.
Which is this whole, workforce housing does not have to go through the plan development process.
Yeah. I remember Kathy talking about that when we were doing the task force. Yeah.
Right.
But I think we need to clarify that if it's defined in one section of the code, that whether that definition relates to another section of the code.
No, that only, what's in the chapter on plan developments only applies to a project that is a plan development. It's, if somebody submits a plan development application, then they have to comply with everything that's in 2124.
Okay.
We'll
So
have
two-
Office of Law clarify.
So, yeah, separate instances, but they use the same definition, but the definition is only related to the specific project, whether it be planned or workforce.
Right, so under plan developments, there are 3 kinds of plan developments, and they each have a different requirement for common open space. And
Okay.
so if you're a residential plan development, you have to do blah, blah. If you're a mixed one, you have to do blah, blah. And, you know, in a business one, there's a third different requirement. But we also have a common open space requirement in the BCE district where we have a whole separate process that's set up for mixed-use projects like, is it 1901? The big building?
Yeah.
1901, that was, there we added something to the code to allow a big mixed-use project like that, and it has its own common open space standards.
So Code 101, when you have that word underneath a code section, you're just talking about the applicability of it. You're not really defining it. I was just looking to see if there was like a general definition at the
We
beginning
could
of
put a
Title
minimum
21.
percentage of common open
Yeah.
space that has to be devoted to common open space in here. We did not do that. I think that we were trying to look at this, that it could be because it can be in any zoning district.
Right.
If you had a workforce housing project, say in,
Let's use perfect example. If it's where the Admiral Tire is in my ward, or where the seafood or the old seafood center is, if you were to build commercial with residential, you would not really have a need or space for common open space.
right, and you might you might want to have some of the common open space might be something that's inside the building. I mean, it gives it a little bit more flexibility.
Perfect.
Once you set that minimum percentage, it's
More tricky.
It makes it more difficult because workforce housing is for any zone. But we can look at adding a percentage if that's what you all want to do.
I think we're good.
We're
Yeah,
good.
I think we're fine.
We're good.
All right, so-
we see this as aspirational zoning here, and I think we've talked about this before. We don't know that this is going to work. This is one of the things
we're gonna make it work.
Well, it's like we have to keep moving forward with new ideas to try and create an environment where we can have more affordable housing. So that in that sense, I feel it's aspirational.
For E, so we're on the last page now, or second to last page, and it's only 2 other things now. For E, the initial allowable maximum rental rates for rental units shall be established by the developer and approved by I want to strike that. And for several reasons, that should be striked. One, I'm working on something that would address the rental rates and issues that we have in the city, specifically related to that. I'm looking at E on page 5. It says the initial allowable maximum rental rates for rental units shall be established by the developer and approved by the City of Annapolis Department of Planning and Zoning. So I'm assuming we can't strike that because the developer would have to set some rate.
Yeah.
But could we give authority to the Department of Planning and Zoning to negotiate rates for affordable housing or housing affordability? I'm sorry.
The rental rates are set by the financing. In other words, if it's tax credit project, the tax credit sets the rates. If it's Section 8, they set the rates. It's a public housing.
Yeah, but what if it's not tax credit? If it's just as we've alluded to, just a market rate housing development that they're trying to get through, but also serve.
I was just going to say, I think that is the one circumstance where this would apply. I mean, Teresa's point is that there are certain types of housing that would be created through this legislation where the rates would be set by others out of our control. But the market rate, yeah, I mean, there would be that we
But
would
this
have to
just says
approve.
maximum.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way it's worded gives the department the authority
Yeah.
to, I mean, I think that it's in there already, what you're
Yeah,
looking for.
Can we say subject to approval?
I mean, it has to be approved by the department.
okay.
Subject to
So there is some negotiation built in there, I think.
By their ability to.
If that's how you all are reading, I'll read it that way too. I just wanted to be clear that's what was being stated. And let me just read it again. The initial allowable maximum rental rates for rental units shall be established by the developer and approved by. Okay, yeah, all right.
You can just approve it.
Yeah, okay, all right. So F. Oh, did you have more on that?
No, we're good.
Okay. F, site design plan review in accordance, that's totally fine. An addition, G, the director of the department may make and enforce regulations in accordance with the provision of Title II, 04, 09, 09D, necessary to make effective the provisions of this section. So basically just everything we did is giving approval to the director.
I believe that's kind of boilerplate that we proceed in accordance to what the ordinance wants. You know, if something comes up, we address the issue.
But if you look at 204090, that's the section of the code that you all added last year that creates that whole process where if a department wants to adopt regulations, they have to, there's a whole process where they have to be advertised and they have to go to some committee and then they come to back to the council. Do they go to rules? Is that who they go to?
Yeah, and then rules doesn't know what to do with them.
Well, this was legislation that the City Council of Annapolis adopted last year.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so last edit, I believe, is the addition on page 6, which workforce is basically defining workforce housing. Means any mix of any type of dwelling units that is affordable to households with an income that does not exceed 120% of the area median income. What if we said units that is affordable to households with an income that starts at like 50% of the median area income? Why can't we start? Why can't we start low?
We don't want to exclude the people below 50%. I mean,
Don't forget.
If they're below 50%, really they wouldn't be in the eligibility for payment. I mean, because your rent has to be, or your income has to be 3 times higher than your rent. So if they were at 30%, they wouldn't be eligible anyway, would they?
It depends on what's being developed. I mean, if the housing that's being developed is like the Willows, they're reaching people at
Okay.
30%. So
All right, cool.
you eliminate.
All right.
And then what, Kathy had a suggested change?
it was, I believe Kathy Ebner from the
Yes,
committee,
please. Yeah, I know she's, yeah, definitely.
She had a suggestion, I believe, to add the word restricted before. So it would say workforce housing means a mix of any type of dwelling units that is restricted to households with an income that does not exceed 120%. I don't recall the rationale. I think she wanted
Instead of
affordable, she wanted the
So it would say
language to be more assertive, I guess.
So it say, yeah, workforce means a mix of any type of dwelling unit that is
me see what I
restricted to households with an income that does not exceed.
That makes sense.
I believe so, yeah.
We just changed that one word affordable to restricted.
Okay.
Restricted need to deem restricted.
That's fine with me if it's fine with my colleagues.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I-
that's right.
I'm concerned about Brooks's no parking requirement. Can the developer still have the option to provide?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
It means there's no minimum requirement.
Okay.
Basically, it's up to the developer to
It's up
decide.
to the developer.
It doesn't-
And if, right,
Now, he could say no, he could put in a maximum, but I don't think that's what you want.
Yeah.
we could change it to say there is no minimum parking requirement. If you wanted to add the word minimum in there, if you feel.
Yeah,
that-
that's fine. Like
Yeah,
I
that's
want
fine.
to put,
Yeah.
as long as we,
So that it's more deceptive.
as long as we get rid of
Yeah.
the minimum
I just-
requirements, that's my big
So
concern.
you're saying for page,
The blue.
Back on, it was on
Page
page
four,
4.
number
Blue for
5,
Brooks. Yeah, I just don't want it to be a deterrent.
no parking shall be required to workforce housing.
Which we would just say there is no minimum parking requirement for workforce housing.
That's
It's
fine.
more, it sounds, doesn't that sound so much better?
I like the other way
It's
version.
like
Workforce housing,
aspirational
no
zoning.
parking
It's right
shall be
there. We
required.
should
Straight
have
to the point.
Should have a definition for it. yeah.
It does the same exact thing.
I like that.
You can vote on that.
It does, in my mind, it does the same thing.
Well, I'm outvoted 2-1, so.
We're not gonna be doing what Alexandria and other cities do, where they put parking maximums in.
All right, so just for clarity, because we have to keep track of these amendments now. So on page 4,
Which one are you?
we're striking
The colors one, okay.
number 5, and we're just saying no minimum parking requirements.
Another way you could approach it is just say this section or requirements of Title 2166 of the code do not apply to this section.
Could we say that?
You could say that.
Okay, well, let's do that.
If you like, yeah, that's fine.
Let's do that. So we'll say, requirements of, okay, so we're basically just switching everything around. Requirements of Title 2166 of the code do not apply to this section. Awesome.
Cool.
Brooks, are you good with that?
Yeah, man. I just don't like parking minimums.
Okay. All right. And
I guess the only thing that I would be concerned about with that is that what we're saying is that we don't want the minimum numbers, we don't want to require parking, but if people were going to provide parking, would we not, and there are other things in 2166, like there's a requirement for bicycle parking. There are other.
What would the minimum be then? Because so if we don't use the language that Cynthia just gave us, and we just say minimum parking requirements are required.
No minimum.
No minimum parking requirements.
Yeah, that's fine.
That might be a compelling reason why you want to have this. We want this one to say no minimum parking because all the other zones have minimum parking requirements. So
okay, all right. So
it might make it a little clearer, right?
Not all the other.
So strike 5.
The other ones that have parking.
Right.
So we'll strike 5 and just put no minimum parking requirements required. Right.
Notwithstanding the requirements.
Can I say a historical question? Did Oxford Landing have parking requirements?
Yes. That's not the issue. The Oxford Landing has off-street parking for every unit there.
In the street?
No, they have
Parking spots. Yeah.
They have parking lot and they still have all those cars in the street?
The problem is, Ellie, is that when families can't afford to live in the city, you have multiple families living in a single house.
Is that what it?
And if you have 5 cars in a house, it's going to be backed up on the streets.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the same thing that's happening in Watergate. It's the same thing happening in Annapolis Roads. Any a multifamily complex in the city of Annapolis has capacity issues with parking. We're seeing it in Ward 6 right now on President Street. You can barely get down the street.
Right, both sides.
Exactly. And so
But I didn't know they had parking lots too, so it's that much worse.
yeah.
And then you also
really ought to
get
pass
combat.
legislation that nobody in the city can own more than one car.
I'm seriously doing that. Or have kids.
Strike that from the hearing. Strike that from the hearing.
Right.
I'm gonna do that in the
Think about
residential
that.
parking districts.
It is a problem in all neighborhoods. I think the problem in Oxford Landing, though, has.
Is this? Yeah.
You have a subdivision that was built with a street that was intended to extend onto adjacent land if adjacent land was developed. But because that did not happen for so many years, that community has become used to that being a dead end street and sort of their
own enclave.
And so when you move on to connectivity, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So
we've seen it other places also.
So all right, I'm going to wrap this up because it's 8:30 and everybody's
talk about closed loop development.
Well, look, everybody's got to be back here at 9 tomorrow. So
what's happening at 9 tomorrow?
Oh, right, 9 o'clock.
Well, that's when work starts. I mean, you all.
Oh no, there's a meeting.
I'm talking about staff. I mean, all right. So we have just very few substitute amendment complete over. No. I'm sorry. Add R3R and STD. We're changing the parking definition.
Right.
We are on page 4, under open space, we're adding property manager to number 3. And then page 6, strike affordable and add restricted.
We agreed on number 3 on the thing that you would let me look at something and
Okay,
give you a
yeah.
suggestion.
All right, so I'll put that-
I'm not sure that you want to do property management
She's
because.
going to talk to Tom about that.
See, the problem with leaving it up to the property manager to control the common open space, they could decide that they're going to do
Get
all
rid of-
kinds
yeah.
of crazy restrictive
Right.
things that people couldn't actually use it. I
Yeah.
don't think you want property management to necessarily.
So I'll just put pending approval, and then once you figure out what you all did with.
We're going to tell you.
Okay, perfect. That's good.
That's when you would get a fence.
All right.
Cynthia, do we have a deadline to get?
Yeah, so we want to get this in on the 10th. So I don't want to overwork Cynthia or have her doing it at the very last minute. What's today? The 29th?
What's happening on the 10th?
The city council.
Okay, so you're introducing this as a substitute on the 10th?
Let me pull up the calendar.
I still don't understand what your game plan is.
Well, we have to reintroduce it because it has to go to public hearing. Actually, Regina, correct. I'm sorry, Madam City Clerk, if you correct me if I'm wrong. It's got to go to rules.
Okay. Basically, the legislation was adopted on first reader. We do not change anything on it, and it went to public hearing. The document that you guys are working now would be considered an amendment, because the next time it goes in front of the city council, it is a second reader, and it's up. That's when we can amend the document that was introduced on first reader to substitute what you're working on tonight.
The amendment will substitute, this will be a substitution.
Yeah, it's just an amendment, and it's gonna change the whole bill.
So,
Everything that needs to be changed is gonna be in that one amendment.
And if
and
we
they're going to adopt it, and then that's going to be the amendment. And if it passes, the mayor's going to ask, "Is this a substantive amendment?" And in the answer, we'll see what that's going to be. And if they say yes, it will have a public hearing on the second meeting of October.
But on that amendment, where does it say this delete? This overrides the first bill?
That's what the whole thing is.
Yeah, that's what,
Okay, but we haven't taken this to planning commission yet.
That's what Cynthia has explained to us as the substitute amendment.
It's a substitute amendment.
Yes.
Keyword substitute.
Yes.
So
they would have to make once if they find it's a substantive amendment and they adopted the amendment, and then they have a vote to see if it's substantive. If the answer is yes, has a public hearing, and then they can make a referral to send it back to the planning commission. It wouldn't come back to city council until after we hear from the planning commission.
So so just my position is that it's not substantive. We didn't change a single thing really.
Right, because they typically vote that it's not substantive.
Yeah.
So we don't take this to planning commission until after you do that whole city council part.
You might not have to take it at all.
Yeah, because if it's not substantive, it doesn't have,
Right.
So
We haven't taken the original bill to the planning commission.
Was it referred there?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we should go ahead and take.
why wasn't the I thought the planning commission has had this bill before.
No. No, we haven't done that. It hasn't gone to planning commission yet because we thought that the original, we misunderstood. We thought the original bill was going to be withdrawn and the new bill was going to be introduced. But so what we're supposed to do now is take the original bill to planning commission, and then we will present
those amendments. Yep.
Present this alternative document as an amendment to planning commission.
Okay.
Is that what we're supposed to do, Gina?
Well, I'm pretty sure that if the original bill on first reader was referred to the planning commission and it hasn't gone there, I'm pretty sure the time has lapsed for it to go to the planning commission, right? I mean, didn't you do this back in January?
This July.
July?
Yeah.
No.
This was July.
This year?
It was July because it was right before we went on recess. Yeah.
Well, then it should be in the planning commission.
Okay, then we can advertise it for planning commission and take it to planning commission on October 20th.
Right, and we'll wait to,
we can meet the advertising deadline to take it to planning commission on October 20th.
Yes, and once we hear from you, we notify Cynthia that you have your findings.
put it on the city council agenda and do the advertising that we need to do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's easy.
So, okay, so then it would go back to city council sometime in November, but it has to be advertised twice for city council.
Yeah, that's
So whatever that works out to be.
Exactly.
So we're talking about, and this is what I didn't want, because nobody is going to do anything once we get into November. Let's face it, everybody's on vacation at that point. So we're not talking about getting this bill before the city council until January. And
No, we're talking about.
We could.
I don't know, because we got two, if it goes to the planning commission, as the rules currently state, it has to go through 2 public hearings of the planning commission.
No, one, well,
Yeah, can we talk about that? Are we still, Alex?
So because we are still remote, and that's another discussion entirely. Our policy, or the policy for all boards and commissions, has been to have 2 public hearings. To me, that seems a little excessive in some cases.
well, you could vote to waive that, and we would just, when we advertise it and we put it on the agenda, we won't say that it's continued to the next meeting, and then the public would know it's only going, because that's how we cover that issue on the agendas. So that's a possibility
let's talk.
if you're agreeable to that.
Let's talk.
So we could get it done on October.
If we, okay, so it'll be October, November. I still am very, like, I've had legislation introduced after a recess previously. You all may be still working, but the council is everything starts to slow up once you get into the holiday season. So I'll be, following up just to make sure that we keep the momentum going, So let's do
We're going to
that.
advertise it for the October 20th planning.
Yeah, and I'll let you do all the rules and regulations. I don't want to break any rules, but
You just have to get the city council to work more in November to set.
listen, I'm gonna try to get us working 6 special meetings of the Annapolis. I'm kidding.
We meet twice a month.
So when the planning commission, you can say that you're gonna wait, you could waive the second, but you say that so all the people show up for the first or respond to the first.
way
We'd have to
people
say that
think
up
it's-
front,
yeah.
so
Okay,
people
so they
don't
know that
think, oh, I can watch it and then
Right.
come to the next
It's
one.
not going to, it's, the way we do that on the agendas now is we say, we're doing yada, yada, and then under that it'll say, and will be held open until we have language like that. We won't do that this way. So, and especially with legislation, the difference between the planning commission review of legislation and say a project is they're making a recommendation to you. It's going to have an additional public hearing before the city council. So if people miss the opportunity to testify at the planning commission, they can come to city council. Whereas with a project, the planning commission is the end of the road on a project and they're approving it. So that's more important for projects, for it to be left open so that.
As opposed to the regulation. Yeah.
Clarification.
Okay, that's perfect. It's 8:43. I really want to get the staff out of here.
I thought we weren't watching football until Brett Favre pays back all the money.
I don't know.
Oh, is this all about you guys going to watch football?
No, it's not. It's about, it's 9 o'clock and I want to make sure the staff can go home. All right, is there a motion to make a favorable recommendation of 04022 to the appropriate commissions?
I'd like to make a favorable recommendation for the comprehensive plan, please. No.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Awesome. Thank you. This
Eric's comprehensive plan is now 1,000 pages. It's going to be done in volumes now.
the comprehensive plan should just override ordinance, but anywho, I appreciate this so much. I think this is a good start. We got other bills in the pipeline. Everybody's working, and so I'm sure we'll be in contact a lot over the next couple of weeks. This is great, and everybody have a good night. The meeting's adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's really good.